Welcome everyone back to Unbroken Veterans. Today we have Matt Eversmann. And just to start it out, for those who don't know you, Matt, we'll just start off with who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, so great intro. And I say that, the answer to that question, my wife and I talk about all the time. And this will be a short answer, I promise, but it'll kind of go into the theme of veterans and transition and all that stuff. You say, what do you do? And I'm an
Yeah,
investment banker, I'm a fill in the blank, whatever it is. And you realize, like, that's not what defines us. And I'm not trying to be too philosophical so quickly.
yeah,
What do I do right now? You know what? I write books with James Patterson. And I don't say that to be a weasel. I say that like the farthest reach of what any infantryman could ever possibly think his career would take him to is completely off the charts. Like I say yes to a lot of things. And so at the moment, I do research and interviews and help James Patterson write some books. Bigger answer to the question, I would say, is I'm working really hard to be a good husband and father. And again, more to follow as we talk about this, but it's an important, I think, conversation about what defines us and what transitions like and where we're going in the future and blah blah blah. But I kind of stand by that. What do you do, Matt? I'm working to be as good a father and as good a husband, as good a brother, as good a son as I can possibly be. And I say that for you've known me for 35 seconds. I really, truly, honestly mean that. That's what I'm working to do.
Yeah,
yeah,
I can identify that for sure. Um I like to serve. Granted, I am selective about who I'm serving, but so between the army and then for me, I'm a product of divorce. So it was very important. I found a wife, a partner, a teammate, and we very much run a relationship like that as teammates. And so to serve my wife, I like to do. Luckily, when it comes to some of the chores, there's ones I like to do, she doesn't, vice versa. But there's definitely I enjoy getting certain things out of the way that I know won't be something she has to worry about later. Trying to be more involved, and that's something I've done more lately. Is I got stagnant, tried to get more involved, and so it's been something I'm working on. So I definitely identify with what you're saying there, and I do. Um, we I've started asking more questions in these interviews about fatherhood and as well as husbandry. It's not the right word. um, yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting to that with you because especially talking our last person we interviewed is Pat McNamara, and he had some good advice on especially the being a father part. So I see a correlation between a lot of prior service members and trying to put in the work to be a good husband and father. And so that's something aside from just transitioning, or I wouldn't even say aside, I guess with transitioning, focusing on those things because I know my wife gives up a lot when I've only been in the reserve and deployed once. So I know she gives up a lot on weekends or long weekends in the deployment, but trying not to ramble here. But so I try to mirror that by really being present when I'm home. So
Yeah. No, and listen, I'm nodding my head and I quick time out, guys. If you'd asked me this question, call it 5 years, 10 years, certainly 15 years ago when I retired, I would have looked at you like, Dr. Phil, Oprah, kind of shut up. Because it doesn't pay the bills, it doesn't, but it truly this idea of new identities and kind of what defines you and
yeah,
making money is make we will I'd love, in fact, we'll talk about making money, later on
yeah,
and living a life. However, I would just throw in, this idea, this revelation I had about, identities and finding this new identity, whether it's as a reservist, as a ranger, paratrooper, green beret, fill in the blank, doesn't matter. You
yeah,
know, that's a challenge. And to me, that which really I guess I probably should open with, my identity, I realize like you got to put it heart and soul into to the people that matter most. And that is, that's the family. That is your whatever you're blessed to be, whether husband, wife, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, blah, 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 fill in the blanks. that's where it has to be the five hole of everything you do. At least I think that's just my
No,
two
I
cents or
agree.
whatever.
Yeah.
I see a carryover between so like when you're young, you're always about like, what's the sexy looking thing, right?
Yep.
Like what looks good. Well, so when you're talking to like, Matt Eversmann from Ranger Bat, you're like, you want to talk about all the cool stuff. You don't realize that there's actually a lot of knowledge to be gained on the stuff that actually matters, that isn't as sexy, or you almost liken it to Nick and I had a mission where we went to an Afghani outpost and we had some higher ups that were going to inspect it, and so of course they split up our platoon as to who had what job and what we were doing. So in theory, I kind of had a sexy job because I was in the room with all the guns that the ANA had to put down, and so my job was if any of them broke off and came for the guns, my job was to stop them. Which on paper, saying it sounds sexy, but it's really not. I stood in a room with a bunch of guns. Nick had the harder job and the way cooler job in my mind, which was you guys had to look after the soldiers, but the other thing was you guys had to make them feel comfortable and not like you guys are the dominant guys and they're standing there unarmed. It's like didn't you
We
this,
pretty much just talked about WWE the whole time.
yeah.
They
And
loved
so, yeah, just definitely seeing a difference between what looks cool and then what really is cool or what matters when you're a little older, the maturity, I guess, that comes with it. So,
Well, and I love your answer, honestly, just because that's our main focus. I feel like kind of with this podcast is to show people, especially veterans that are transitioning out, that they're even if they feel broken, they're not. And with what you're saying is even if you feel like you have nothing that's bigger than yourself anymore, just being a father or being a mother, being intentional with that new identity, that's really what matters, and that can bring you through
yeah,
some hard times.
100%. And again, there's a backstory to all of it. I'm kind of sharing the far right side from what happened when I left the military. But once you realize it becomes very crystal clear, and you like,
Right.
how did I know that? Because listen, you all know this too. We joined an institution that is, it's a meritocracy, and we judge everybody for everything. And it's always looking around. And that's not always a bad thing. I don't think, you see that guy or the gal with the shit on their chest, and they're like, wow, I want to get, I'm a parachutist. I want to be a senior jumper. I want to be a master parachute, whatever. There's always something more to aspire to. And then you get it all and you're like, man, look. And then you talk about Pat McNamara. I mean, what an amazing, what an amazing guy. I don't know him personally by any means. I know him by reputation. And any one of us, the three of us knuckleheads sitting right here would be like, I want to be Pat McNamara. Like, that guy is the coolest dude in the world, which I say that I'm sure he really is in person,
yeah,
an amazing guy. I mean, truly, I say that in the spirit it's intended. However, once we leave that behind and we move out to this new world, what's in front of us and where are we going? And, nobody cares how many jumps you had. Nobody cares about, I mean, they do because it's great conversation, but,
right.
oh, I was on a jump clearing team, or I was on a
Hmm.
recce team, or, fill in the blank of any unit. I was working with the ANA. That was great then, but now, like,
Yeah.
what's it doing for us now? And again, not at all to dismiss it, not to be
Yeah.
that guy, but I hope you see where I'm going, and I
Oh,
hope you
absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
hear it's intended.
Yeah. Well, it's like you did great things, but you got to keep doing more great things. Sometimes great things look different. It's
Mm-hmm.
like I had these achievements and that's really great, but are those medals currently making you a good father or husband? And so that's where you can't dwell on the past. Is kind of what you're saying. You can't focus on the
Absolutely,
past. What's the next great thing you're gonna do? Is it, you're gonna coach your kids' team? Are you gonna take your wife on an amazing honeymoon or excuse me, an anniversary trip or something like that? Like absolutely staying with the times and generating new good things.
absolutely, no, 100%. And gosh, you put a quarter in me, I won't shut up, so I'll be quiet. But
We got dollars.
it is it's an interesting proposition that no one told me. Like, in all of the, you know out processing all of the we use transition, like we're, doggone having a drink of water, but no one tells you, they tell you the step-by-step stuff, which really doesn't work, but no one gets to the focus on you, the person, you, the individual, married, single, doesn't matter, divorced, doesn't matter, all that stuff. Where are you going on the future? Because again, hey, I was a master rated parachutist with 100 and blah, blah, blah jumps. And I'm like, the mortgage company still would like their money.
Yeah, yeah.
They would enjoy being paid for your privilege to live in their house. So, what are you doing about that? Which is another part of this subject, but that focus
Yeah.
back to, hey man, new identity doesn't mean fake, and it doesn't mean false, and it doesn't mean the past doesn't matter, but it does mean, we've got to be looking forward. And I'll say one more quick commentary, guys, that it pains me, and I say this with love, but the SEALs have this great phrase that says, the only easy day was yesterday.
Yeah.
And it really, golly, you gotta hand it to them. It's so true. You can apply that to everything, I think, in human life. And again, I'm like, the SEALs, they need more marketing stuff, but it really is. That is it. That is truly it. Yesterday is the past. What are you doing tomorrow?
Yeah. And now that we've talked down about the past, let's dwell on your past a minute. Because our
Take it
next
back.
question is, let's take it back. I'd love to hear more. And for as much as I've learned in the last couple of weeks, still want our audience to hear a little bit about how you got into the military, kind of like an origin story, if you will. And then, of course, what your military career was like. And we can talk about Mogadishu as much or as little as kind of like we discussed as we want. But of course, I know you deployed to Iraq years later, and so love to hear more about some of the stuff that maybe you aren't asked to talk about as much. And then of course from there we'll go to transitions. So
Yeah.
where'd you come from?
Yeah, so great, and I love to chat about this, and I didn't used to be candid, because I used to be, a little embarrassing, to be quite candid, which will kind of come out, I think, in the punchline of this story. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. I grew up in a small rural town in Virginia called Natural Bridge, literally no stoplights. No stoplight farming town in the Shenandoah Valley. And, I didn't know at all what I wanted to do. I had no plan whatsoever for the future. You look at a lump of clay, that was Matt Eversmann. And I like to think, not to talk about me in the third person, but I think I was a good kid. I wasn't, a big rebel, no, horrible, nefarious plots or anything. I just kind of normal teenager. And to land the plane, I went to school because my 3 older siblings went to college, and I assumed that's kind of what I should do. That was the natural progression: graduate high school, go to college, get a career, and it was all very perfunctory. And what I found was, while a decent student, I wasn't a great student, and while somewhat mature, I was really immature. And I got to school and found out that it was really hard. College was hard. It was very difficult. And I watched these peers of mine doing, splendidly, just breezing through. And I mean, I was sinking from day one. And we bore you with college stories, but
I feel like you're describing my experience to a degree.
Yeah. And I say that, it wasn't like a lack of effort. It truly wasn't. I partied like anybody else, but I lived in that library, but just constantly, just failing literally and figuratively from day one. And finally, very mercifully, at the end of my junior year of college, I was an economics and French major, and they very mercifully put me on academic suspension. They they're like, hey, we love you, man, but let's take a little sabbatical.
That happened to me. I'm not kidding.
Yeah,
that happened to me. My senior year.
And at the time, oh my gosh, the world had ended. I mean, the shame. I tell my parents I'm getting
Yeah.
the boot and all this stuff, and they took it like champs. They were my mom and dad were unbelievably supportive. But to bring this to focus, I failed out. I went home to Natural Bridge. I was working in my parents' lumber yard, delivering sheetrock and 2x4s, and one day this high school classmate of mine came in. I can remember it like yesterday. This kid, we weren't close friends, but we were decent friends in high school. And he walks in and he just had this, not to be so cliche, but this pep in his step. He stood a little straighter, chest was a little bigger, he looked a little stracter, and I'm like, hey, Kevin, how are you? And he's like, good, man. I'm home on leave. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Well, you were in college, 3 years ago. He's like, oh man, I failed out after the first semester and I joined the army. And let's face it, at that time in the '80s, it was like, oh, you knucklehead. Like you couldn't find anything else to do. Like that was
Yeah.
sort of. Admittedly, I'm guilty. I'm like, oh wow, and I'm like, so what are you doing in the army? And again, take this scene that I'm trying to build. Natural Bridge, Virginia. I'd never been on an airplane and never seen the other side of the mountain, so to speak. And here's this guy telling me that not only is he in the army, wow, but he's stationed in Germany. And in
Ooh.
1987, Germany is, Berlin is still divided. They're locked and loaded at the Berlin Wall. He's watching spies get traded across the bridge.
Wow.
And he's
Oh.
doing patrols in you on the Czech border, and they're going to Yugoslavia. If anyone can even remember that, they're going to Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
And the threat of the Russians, he's like, we're going to box them up at the Fulda Gap, and you're like, this is like
History.
carpet rides, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
I mean, this is like I'm listening to it like I'm listening to a fairy tale, and I realized right then I'm like, that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do. I need to join the army. And TV time out. I always kind of thought the army or the military, I should say the military, everybody wants to be a Marine. I'm not going to be a Marine pilot. I mean, join the club. And, but it was something like you just do somewhere in the future. Like that'll happen. Who knows when? But like in my mind, that was like, yeah, it's on the radar, but who knows when. And anyway, I remember talking to my parents that night, and they knew Kevin, and I told them like, hey, Kevin Topping came in, and I said, I kind of think I'd like to talk to the recruiter. And they're like, do it. And that's where the journey
Wow.
really began. And
Wow.
it really was, in one sense, to everybody else that's not in the military, would say like, what a dumb story. But for a soldier,
That's gravitational.
imagine there's a lot of people that had a similar kind of experience. And I walked down knowing nothing about nothing. And, I enlisted in the army as an infantryman. And I'll never forget, real quick, I guy comes out and he's like, the recruiter comes out and he's like, yeah, give me the pitch. And they got all the recruiting posters all along the wall. And he says, well, what do you think you want to do? And there was this picture of, the be all you can be world. And there's this picture of this African-American ranger. I didn't know what a ranger was, but this guy was so strapped. His beret was perfect. He had the starched OG 107,
Yeah.
chin like molded from, the ruins of Greece. I mean, this guy was a specimen. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be that guy. That's exactly who I want to be. And of course, the recruiter's like, well, first of all, dude, you're white, and that's not going to work. And second of all, you're an economics major. I think you go in the finance corps. You gotta be kidding me, man. That's the reason I'm here, is because I was a finance major. I'm like, You don't want me managing your money. And anyway, it's sort of funny, but it really is
turns
true.
out the way the government manages money.
Exactly. Well, we could have a whole podcast about that. But lo and behold, long story, not any longer than it needs to be. I enlisted as an infantryman, knowing nothing, and open contract, and wound up at the 10th Mountain Division in Fort Drum, New York, as a brand new, college. I was an E3. They didn't make me an E4. I was an E3 because I had a little college. And man, I got to tell you, I loved it. I loved being a private. I had a database of zero.
Yeah.
There's nothing to compare to, other than wow, you carry all this cool stuff, and you wear a big backpack, and you go out to the woods, and you learn fieldcraft. And I'm like, this is the most amazing thing that a young man could ever want to do. And at the risk of being cliche, I'm like, they're paying me to do it, albeit a little bit, but they're paying me to go out and do this. And wasn't thinking anything of national mission, wasn't thinking anything of great patriotism, although I think I was a good patriot, good patriotic kid. But I found that, man, I finally found something that I enjoy doing. I like the people I'm working with. The bureaucracy is the bureaucracy, and everyone knows that story, but it started to grow on you. It started to grow on me. And this idea now of, hey, you might be called one day to put up or shut up, to serve your country where we need to. And I'm like, bring it. Like, that's what I want to do. I want to go. And anyway, I'll be quiet. But that was kind of the start of this whole journey for me to be an infantryman. And I guess the lesson learned was, the best thing that could have happened to me would have been to enlist in the Army, get on the bus the day after graduation from high school. And again, not knocking on college. I'm going to talk about that later on, but I wasn't ready. I wasn't mature. And the military gave me this great opportunity to kind of develop as a young man, get my head screwed on straight, and start understanding a bigger idea of service, and I like to think in my heart that it's all by design, that's how it's all set. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but I've thought back on that whole experience of basic training, guys, and again, Ranger stuff and all this thing. People have asked me before, I'm like, basic training had a profound influence on my life.
Yeah.
It really.
So then how did you good.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so obviously you made a change at some point and went to Ranger Bat. So I'm curious, like, obviously you saw the poster. So did that continue to influence you and you found out later what that was, or you met somebody, or how did that become a goal? Because
So again, as this is growing, and keep in mind, this is 1987 when I enlisted. So Cold War, it's total Cold War, and we're banging the drum. We're going to fight the Russians in Germany. That we're going to protect Europe. That's it. And Ronald Reagan, the father of perestroika, is the commander in chief. And I mean, it's awesome. I'm like, you're like, Roger that. And I got to the 10th Mountain, and eventually got the opportunity to go to Ranger School. And I went to Ranger School. I was a Winter Ranger, class 290, which I must say, for anyone listening, that was the last hard Ranger School class. But it's over the winter. I started at sometime in November, I guess, of 1989, and it was going to, the school at the time was 70 something days, would take you through Christmas. And at the time in Ranger School, they shut down Fort Benning, or the Ranger branch, for 2 weeks at Christmas, and they called it the Christmas Exodus. So you finished the Florida phase, and you came back to Fort Benning, turned in all your gear, and you got to go home for 2 weeks. You're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
Like, I can go get fat, drunk, and stupid for 2 weeks and enjoy myself. Well, anyway, this is 1989, and December 20th, we got there on the 19th. We got back to RTB on the evening of the 19th, turned all our shit in, and turned all our stuff in, and woke up the next morning, December 20th, 1989, and they had a formation. They had all the Ranger students came together, and the RTB, the Ranger Training Brigade commander, came out, and he said very, very succinctly, I don't remember everything, but basically he said, hey man, at like 0200, we jumped into Panama. And I just get goosebumps as I'm talking to you all right now,
Wow.
some years later, and I'm like, whoa, what? And where this whole story goes is there were a handful of kids from the Ranger Regiment that were in my platoon, and I remember they were heartbroken, they were crestfallen, they're like the blood drained out of their faces, like they're here after a month and a half of Ranger school tomfoolery and just getting abused, and they're like, everybody that I know and love just went to combat except me. And I remember that's when it hit me. I truly, that's when it hit me. I realized these guys they weren't looking forward to go. They were like, oh yeah, I can still go home for Christmas and do my thing. They were like, how do I get to Panama? I got to get there. I got to go. And as it turns out, several of them did. They left that morning, went over to the 3rd Ranger Battalion, got on a plane, and they were in Panama like the next day. And I'm thinking, over the whole Christmas break, that's when it really started to fit into my, my focus was, no, this isn't just something you do. Hey, I want to get a tab on my shoulder. I want to, beat my chest and be like, no, this is, you need to really believe it. You need to understand the significance and the severity of this profession you've chosen. This isn't just to do stuff for fun and a glorified outward bound. This is you're putting yourself literally on the line. And that's when I realized I need to get in that unit. I need to go to that unit that's going to go to war. If there's a statistical probability of the next battle coming, I missed this one, but if the next one happens, I need to be in that unit that's going to get the call. And that's what drove me, a really average guy, probably an okay soldier, but an average guy, to say, like, you know what, I'm going to try out for the Ranger Regiment. And that's kind of where the career, I think, really, really started.
Interesting. So you had gone to Ranger school and you weren't Ranger back, which I know is the thing. I didn't realize that you'd gone to school first and then went to battalion.
Oh yeah, and on top of that, I was then what they love to affectionately refer to as a leg ranger, because I wasn't airborne qualified. So all the guys jumping on all the missions in Ranger school, I'm like, I'm on the bus. And,
dirty leg. Dirty leg.
I was just a total leg, and I say that with affection. But that was it. And I did. In 1992, I reenlisted. My roommate and I plotted a lot, long and hard about it. And he reenlisted to go to the 2nd Battalion. I reenlisted to go to 3rd. And man, I never looked back. I can honestly say it was an amazing journey. And I want to take up all of our time talking about this revelation of becoming an airborne ranger. But for me, what I realized when I got down to 3rd Ranger Battalion, and again, you all, and I say you all, the listeners here, the military at the time, I think they were like, we might have been at almost, 500,000. We might have 500,000, soldiers, on active duty in the Army. And coming from a big conventional unit like the 10th Mountain Division of, call it 25,000 soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a battleship, you're turning a battle.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big, clumsy organization filled with a lot of good people, but big organization. It's clumsy. All of a sudden you get to this unit that's got, 2,500 kids. And all of a sudden everything's more nimble, everything's more agile, and everything is really, really pronounced about this go to war mission. Like, there's no doubt if you get to the 3rd Ranger Battalion or 2nd or 1st at the time, and don't realize that the only reason you're here is to go to war in 18 hours, you missed the boat. And
Yeah.
very few people were in in that kind of
Hmm.
mindset, but it was like, hey man, if whatever you're doing today isn't about shooting or first aid or PT, you're wrong. Like, and
Yeah.
you're like, oh man, that's a whole different kettle of fish than I had with my experience. And I do have to say real quick before I be quiet, it sounds like a backhanded compliment to the rest of the Army. And I realize that as I say it, you're like, oh, 10th Mountain guys or 101st or 82nd or fill in the blank. No, it's just such a profoundly different mission. And as we all know,
Yeah.
as this story progresses post 9/11, listen, our forces, the formations in our military stepped up and did incredible things. I mean, and I
Yeah.
in this book we wrote called "Walk in My Combat Boots," but for me in peacetime, getting to the Ranger Regiment all of a sudden was like, this is what it's all about. Like, this
Yeah.
is where you need to be.
Did your path ever cross with John Lovell? Okay.
I know the name, but I don't know him personally.
Okay. Yeah. He was in Third Ranger Battalion, is why I asked. He joined after you, but so he was a part, like he basically was going through, it was either RASP or Ranger School. And like as he finished, they were like, we're going to Afghanistan. Like for the first. Like they
Oh
were,
man.
other than SOF and whatever Marines they had over there at the time, he was like first boots on ground from Ranger slash Big Army. And so I know your timelines probably overlap, but I know like while it's smaller than Big Army, it's still a large organization. So I'm not under the impression that everybody just knows everybody automatically. But well, good. And he did say, he said in Ranger Battalion, the mentality, at least as he experienced, was every day you were trying out for your job.
Yeah,
He was
yeah.
like, "You better be the best radio operator. You better be the best rifleman. You better be the best, et cetera, et cetera." Fill in the blank.
No, it was true, and I'll tell you, I'll take it one step further. Cooks, mechanics, pack clerks, they're going to the shoot house. You're gonna get at least 80% on the PT test, and it really does not matter. You're still your job, and golly, much like the SEALs, this Marine Corps thing comes back to haunt us about where we're all riflemen that fly planes kind of thing, but it really was true. It honestly was. It's like, the mission, this is a mission, and I guess that's the exclamation point on. It's like your mission is to prepare for war and prepare to support guys at war and prepare to everything is a wartime focus. And that was startling to me. And again, I know it sounds like a Ranger infomercial, talking, and it sounds really dismissive, but to go in there, as we're going to get into this deployment to Mogadishu in 1993, the idea was, if you don't exceed the standards, you're gone.
Yeah.
You know, no, that's it. You're not a bad guy. You just didn't meet the standards, and enjoy Korea or wherever else we're going to send you. And so there was always this. I tell people it's a self-licking ice cream cone of accountability and responsibility of not just meeting standards but exceeding them, and they're all published. Everybody knows there's no guesswork. We're not pulling the carpet out from under anyone. It's like, if you can't meet this standard, then you're really not welcome in this unit. And there's a million other kids that want to take your job. So you better read FM 7. I don't even know what they call it today, but like 7-8. You better know the battle drills. You better know pretty much everything about not only the science of machine gunnery, but you better know the art of it. Everything ought to be better. Everything ought to be to the next
Yeah.
level. Everything. And that in itself is a lesson that probably more than anything, I've always wondered why we don't have that same mentality out here in the professional business world
Right.
of,
Yeah.
I like, and it's so disappointing because you find that mediocrity out here is the standard.
Yeah.
It is, nice people, but
I'd say sub mediocrity. Sometimes it blows my mind because I don't think of myself. I don't think I have a poor work ethic, but I don't think of myself as like I put in the work, right? I can put my name on the day. Do I break my back every single day? No, I certainly don't. But then when I hear about like some friends of mine will say, "Oh, this coworker did this," and I'm like, "How are they not fired?" And
Right.
they're like, "Or is this a one-time thing?" And they're like, "No, this person's been like that for 8 years at the same
yeah,
job." And I'm like, "How?"
They've been showing up late for three
Yeah,
years.
like it just blows me
yeah,
away.
absolutely. And listen, and you all, I mean, listen, we're hitting a nerve right there because I think
Yes.
I think that, and let's just say, listen, there are plenty of sluggos in the military. There are plenty of
Oh
kids,
yeah.
Right.
there are, and we got it. All their bell curve kind of stuff. They're the people over there. However, I think that, just to jump ahead for a second, one of the hardest lessons amongst many was just this very subject. You're like, how do these people, how are they getting paid? And sometimes more than me or anybody else, and they're just doing an average job. Like they're not, and this gets into leadership, and we're talking to Fortune 100 companies, of people that are like, hey, they had a good idea and they got put in for nepotism or whatever other reason, but man, they are just shitty leaders.
Yeah.
They are the first thing about leadership. And like the three of us grew up learning very basic ideals about how to treat people and get the most out of them. I mean,
Yeah.
you read anything that Simon Sinek, and I've never met the man,
Oh,
and I'm sure, and I don't mean it again, dismissively. In fact, I think maybe he was a Marine. But when he writes a book and says, leaders eat last, and everybody at IBM and JP Morgan Chase is like, oh, this guy's a gift of the Magi. And you're like, Lance corporals and PFCs learn this in about day 3 of basic
Yeah.
training. You're like,
right.
this is really this isn't that hard a concept. Like, what else you got to tell me, man? And well, he's living on a yacht in the south of France, and here we are in
Right.
our, talking to each other from, about, I hope I can pay the rent next month.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of hit me now too. It's like military, you get an accelerated experience because how many people start a civilian job and then they work it for however many years and they have the same boss. A lot of stuff's very stagnant. There's not a lot of change typically. And then meanwhile, like, oh, so and so promoted, so now they're in a different unit now. Now we got so and so, or now you're in charge. And the rate of turnover, even in the reserve, the changes that which the reserve is certainly more stagnant than active duty, but there's still a lot of changes and that you see, which yeah, kind of accelerates. It's like you have a it's like you've lived a professional career and we'll say 20 years Army service. You've probably done 40 years of civilian job in that. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like,
good point. Really good point. You're exactly right. And I not to question, throw it back on you guys as the interviewers, but you scratch your head and you think, how could these institutions be that fundamentally different? I mean,
yeah,
people are people. Let's face it, people are people everywhere, and they're great people everywhere. There are sluggos everywhere. But how could, not to beat up on JP Morgan, but, how could the experience at JP Morgan or fill in the blank be that much different than, the Maryland National Guard or the, Second Brigade Combat Team of the 10th Mountain Division? There's still people, smart people, good
yeah,
people. How can they be that different? And I think therein lies the rub. I mean, that's what's so complicated and frustrating and hard about making this jump to this new world, because it's just not the same. And man, it's perplexing. It's head scratching. It's every other, cliche you can throw in, but you're like, fuck, man, I'm out here and I'm just trying to do a good job, and I'm mired in this quagmire of, just average, just
Yeah.
like it's just average, and that seems to be okay, you
It's
know.
it's funny having this conversation because it's making me connect a lot of things in my head, just talking this out with you. But when you think about it, remember the military brought in Lean Six Sigma, right? They were like, oh, we're going to treat the military like a business, which, like you said, it'd be a whole nother podcast to go into why that's a horrible idea. But what's making
Yeah.
me what I'm realizing right now is it's really the other way around. It'd be a lot easier and make a lot more sense to take a lot of military values, especially in terms of leadership, to the corporate world and run the corporate world more like the military in obviously ways that make sense. You can't make a dude vacuum the parking lot for being late or something, but
Right. Right. Yeah. No, like taking this kid, and smoking the piss out of him is probably not, it's frowned upon out here. But this idea, and I will tell you and again, not to beat up on anybody that's gone through their Six Sigma training, but first time I heard about a black belt, I'm like, oh, cool, man. We're gonna go do combat. And that true story, that is not me being funny and being a smartass. I'm like, the black belt thing, that's pretty cool. And then you realize, like, oh well, we're just looking at efficiencies and management, blah blah blah. And I'm like, yeah, but you're still a dud. Like you're still a complete colossal dud. And I wouldn't follow
wow,
you, out of a wet paper bag. And I don't care
I'm
what you
with
have.
you.
So anyway, enough beating up on those guys. But you're right. You are right. And I think to land the plane here, um, when you're in the military, and it doesn't happen the whole time. It certainly didn't happen my entire career. There's good units, bad units, great command team, bad command team.
Yeah, yeah,
Even in the
absolutely.
Ranger Regiment, even in this panacea of, gosh, the Ranger persona and all that stuff. Listen, there were times there it was just a bad chemistry. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I got to get out of this unit. This sucks. This is horrible. I mean, God for
yeah,
Ranger gods, forgive me, but the good old boy system gone bad, and
yeah,
that does happen because why? Well, people, there are not great people everywhere. That's sort of a double negative, I guess, but it does happen, and I suspect if you canvassed all the units from the pinnacle of the soft community, which we all I still do in some senses think, oh, that's got to be the best of the best because
yeah.
they're 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 this. But I bet if you talk to any of those guys in any of the tiered units, and you maybe not on the record, but they'd be like, man, that commander sucked. That sergeant major sucked. My troop commander, my wrecking
Yeah,
team, blah blah blah. It all sounds sexy, but like, yeah, that guy was an asshole. He was horrible. He or she was just, sucked. And,
yeah.
to go again, you even think at that level to go from there out to, this again, I'm a Six Sigma black belt. And they're like, what have you done for me lately? I mean, it's
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah. So you reenlisted in 92. Obviously, Mogadishu happened in 93. So I'm assuming you reenlisted or in Ranger Bat, got the call, and you guys went out there.
Yeah.
Correct,
So
correct me if I'm wrong.
no, you're right there. Reenlisted, I got there in 92, spent a year traveling, literally going around the world. I mean, it was I mean, exceptional. There's no adjective to describe that experience for me. And I say that for me, I wouldn't speak for anyone else, just for me personally. Um, you know, uh, and just a quick before we get into Mogadishu, when I got there in 1982, the regimental commander was a gentleman named David Grange. And David Grange was RCO, and he had been a Vietnam veteran. So this is 92, so we still had Vietnam veterans in the force. Dave Grange had been, a LERP in Vietnam, which right off the bat, you're like, you just,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
pretty
totally.
reflective.
Yeah,
And he then got to Delta. He was a Ranger battalion commander. Desert One, in First Ranger Battalion, and then he went to Delta and did, like every operation that anyone's ever heard of, let alone all the stuff I'm sure we haven't. And it was just a stud. I mean, just to put it plainly, was just an absolute stud. And he was the regimental commander when I got there. And Colonel Grange, he had this great saying. He said, we teach our Rangers how to think and not what to think. But it was all in this idea of combat, getting ready for combat. He's like, you can go shoot expert during the day. You got to be able to shoot expert at night. If you can change a magazine on a sunny day, you got to do it in the rain, and on and on. It's like change the variables, make everything, because you've got to keep refining your skills. And so if you do it in the jungle, you got to do it in the mountains. If you do it in the mountains, you got to do it in the desert. If you do it, on and on and on. So we traveled all around the world, and it really was amazing. I mean, like, all of a sudden, I'm like, this is what I thought the infantry really was. I mean, don't get me wrong, I loved my time in the 10th Mountain, but I got here and I'm like, this is like Disneyland. Like, this is crazy. This is amazing. And I'll never forget, we were in El Paso, Texas, at Fort Bliss in the summer in July, I guess, of 1993. And we were rehearsing what they had this training cycle, and I'm kind of bastardizing it because I'm sure it's antiquated now. But at the time, there'd be a Ranger battalion and a Delta squadron and a 160th company and maybe some SEALs too, although they hadn't really gotten too much prominence, as I recall at the time. And no offense to the SEALs then, but so this whole Army SOF community is broken down that, when you went on to your alert cycle, when you went on to, RRF1, Ranger Ready Force 1, which is, pagers are back in the day, they give you a pager because, no drink, pager, all that stuff. And, prior to that, though, you would rehearse, they would get the whole force together, and they would have this magnificent training exercise to practice whatever they thought the most likely threat was going to be on the next alert cycle. All right. And we were at Fort Bliss, Texas, and doing this big mission, super secret squirrel stuff. And I remember we were getting ready to do a night jump. We all were out, manifest call, and we all get out to the plains, and we're all rigged up, and we're waiting and waiting. And the jump master came over and got some of the leaders together and said, hey, just letting you know that the battalion commander and the company commanders and sergeant major, like all the command group have been pulled out to some meeting, some secret meeting, while we're like on the runway waiting to load. Like, and like, yeah, I hear it's a real world mission. And we're like, no, it's probably not. It's probably an EDRI. We're probably just, playing this game. And long story short, they came out and they're like, hey, Bravo Company, pack your bags. You're going to Fort Bragg. And we de-rig, pack all our stuff. And, 5 hours later, we're on a C5 flying to Fort Bragg.
Holy shit, no kidding.
Wow.
That fast. I mean, I know it's supposed to be that fast, but.
And we're all just thinking like, well, this is just, again, this is Army, reindeer. That's what we're doing.
I'll believe it like once I get there.
Yeah.
And so we get there and they take us to, I didn't know Fort Bragg at all, but we get out to this really remote site and, it's very austere. And, unpack our stuff. Nobody's saying anything. Nobody's telling us anything. Like, tomorrow we're going to prep for a mission. We're like, okay, great, wonderful. Yeah. And all of a sudden, these guys with, black Adidas boots and green flight suits and big mustaches are walking around. And we're like, wait a second, man, who are these dudes? And they realize, like, well, these are Delta guys, and we're getting ready to train this. We're going to do this training mission with the Delta guys. That's pretty cool because that's never happened before. And anyway, the land of the whole plane, they tell us like, no, we're Bravo Company, 3rd Ranger Battalion, and a squadron from SFOD, are going to go to do a real world mission. It didn't tell us where, didn't tell us what, but just it was going to be some kind of mission where we're going to go snatch somebody. And we're like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like, wow, we're
Yeah.
going. And day by day it came out. We were started this rehearsal, and then it finally, like, the jig was up. They're like, all right, we're going to Mogadishu. We're waiting on the president to make the call. We're going to go capture this guy or kill him, this warlord named Mohammed Adid. And it was just excitement. I mean, it was the coolest thing. Like, we're really going to go do a real world mission. And
I'm excited now, and it's 30 years later, and I know what happens. That's yeah.
exactly, it was. And so again, this was just taking it to the next level. And we're training, it's awesome. It's exciting. And not just exciting because we're doing this real world mission, but now I'm getting, as a young squad leader, young E6, I'm seeing how this whole, how this whole process really works.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's like,
absolutely.
wow, okay, what these guys do is important there, and what we do is important here, and what the aviators do is important, and all this stuff. And you realize, it's to coin something I wish I could have come up with myself, but it wasn't me. When a Delta guy says, "Hey, man, we're just doing really basic stuff really, really well." Like, that's it. Like,
Wow.
this isn't, it looks sexy and it sounds sexy because, little birds and Spectre gunship and
Yeah,
Delta and Rangers. He's like, but this is nothing more than basic infantry stuff at a PhD level. And I'll never forget. I'm like, no, you know what? I get it. I totally do. This is, there's the science of it, and then there's the art. And this is taking it to the most artistic level, if you will, of
yeah.
infantry skills. And that was just awesome.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's
Um,
similar to what Tom Satterley said, because I listened to the Sean Ryan show, and he was talking about how I mean, you get to Delta, and he's like, they treat you like it's day one, and they're like, "Are you sure you know how to use a compass?" And they go through all the basics again. He said, "You learn real fast that you showed up there thinking you were hot shit, and you figure out like, oh no, I didn't know the basics at all,
Wow.
and they square you away." And so that's
yeah, no, it was. And so, this mission, I mean, kind of, la-di-da-di everybody, hey, pack your bags, we're going. And we palletize our kid and off we go. And I'm like, I've never been to war before, and as a should have told this quick backstory. When I got to the Ranger Battalion in 1992, I bet 80% of the battalion all were Panama vets. They all had
mm,
CIBs, they all had mustard stains, they'd all been to combat. Even, like, kids that were privates were now E4s or
was
young
that
E.
I know Strucker had been there, right?
Yeah,
He'd been to
yep.
going to Panama, yeah. So
Yeah. No, there
okay,
was a whole slew of them. In fact, from the Rangers sides, I look back. I mean, a lot of them were combat veterans, and then there was me, with nothing. And a little note to anyone listening: if you're ever in that position, don't be afraid to ask questions. I was too intimidated to say, "Hey, what's it like?" Because even to a subordinate, but I really wish I would have. I really wish I would have sat down, and I put the burden on me. I wish I would have asked. It would have been great if they would have told, but it would have been. I wish I would have asked, like, what's it like? What's it really gonna be like when someone's shooting at you? And again, not the knuckleheads that are like,
right, yeah, yeah,
Right.
but for the legitimate guys that would say, hey, this is what's going to happen, man. When someone's shooting at you, this is exact. No matter all your training, this is what you're going to do. This is what it's going to feel like, and it's okay. Get behind
yeah,
cover, wait for the shooting to stop, and then stand up and shoot back really fast. At the bad guys, and
yeah.
kind of go from there, and trust your training. But again, I didn't ask. Nobody told me. So for me, October 3rd was an incredible overload of senses and experiences that, who knows, maybe would have or wouldn't have. had any influence on the outcome. But that is, if I could jump ahead for a second, one of the reasons I decided to re-enlist was because, like, you know what, I'm never going to put a kid in that position. You know, I've got this experience now, and if I can share it with my soldiers, you know, for the next battle, you know, I feel like I'm going to do that. And that's not because I'm so noble and I'm this great a guy. I don't mean it like that. However, from a professional, you know, military, you know, from a warrior perspective, and again, we throw that term around a lot, but I was like, man, it would have been so easy just to share, you know. And so I kind of took it on my personal mission to share my experiences as a
Yeah.
young, you know, squad leader. Like,
Yeah.
tell a kid what it's going to be like.
No, I totally get that because I'm the same way. When I train the next generation, whether it's like mount door kicking or whether it's our bread and butter, which is route clearance, I very much treat it, and half the time I tell them, hey, I'm nobody special. I'm just a dude that I'm at the rank I'm at. I'm doing what I'm doing, but I'm like, I just have this knowledge. I'm a manila folder and you're reading it. And I don't have this knowledge because I'm a super cool guy or because I did incredible things here and there. I'm like, I happened upon this knowledge as accidentally as you are right now. And so here it is. So I
Yeah.
totally get the way you looked at it because yeah, I mean there's just stuff you experience on the battlefield too versus training. Like one of our things is when you rehearse for an IED det in a route clearance convoy, one of our SOPs is, when you're doing amongst all the other things you're doing, you're looking for secondaries. And so you practice that. Well, you never practice it with a real ID. So when I was in a truck that took an IED, I looked out the window for secondaries. I couldn't see shit. There was dust everywhere. So
Yeah.
I was like, so I kind of tell my guys that now. I'm like, don't not look for it, but just don't be surprised if you can't see shit because
Right.
that's a real
Right.
world puzzle. So I very much am with you there as far as I just have this information. I'm going to give it to you guys. So
Yeah. No, and Sam, what you just said is, you know, that little 10 seconds, and not to be patronizing, but that 10 seconds of, hey, man, you know, it's going to be chaotic. You know, you get jarred from the blast and you're going to look around and you're not going to be able to see anything. And that's okay. Like, you can take a
yeah,
pause for a second. You know, that, like, somebody will hear that and be like, okay, I
yeah,
got it. You know, Sam told me this and I remembered it. And then
yep,
truly, of all the shit funneling down to what you just said, and again, forgive me for stepping on the sandbox, but that's
no,
the
yeah,
kind of stuff that
yeah.
nobody tells you. And you know,
No
because
one,
we're anyway.
no,
I'm
no one told me for 7 years. It until it happened to me that I was like, I'll probably pass that note along to the next dude. Hey, it's like
yeah,
worry about the radios. You can't see anything. It's okay. Just handle the
right,
radio. But
right. Which
so
then also will answer. We'll bring up the next question. Well, then what do I do, Sergeant? You know, then what? You know, because I've been
right.
told, you know, I followed this protocol and, you know, the battle drill, and I'm like, well, what happens when something happens that's not in the battle drill? That, again, therein is the information that we have, that knowledge we have to share. And again, I don't want to make it sound like, oh, you know, we just
No,
saw fire for the first time, but
yeah, you're
to me,
good.
it was that those were the kind of things that was important.
Yeah. Um. So Mogadishu happened. We can talk about any more learning experiences if you want. If you want to move on to the next part, that's great too. It's kind of up to you. Uh.
Listen, I'm yours, man. You know,
Yeah.
I don't want to bore anybody, and I don't want to. You know, you kind of keep asking, and you
Okay.
can shut
Well,
up.
Yeah. You.
yeah, well, I'm kind of curious, just do you have any advice to anybody, whether they're in a combat situation or not, but just to handle that pressure of just getting just kind of thrown into something that you were thrown into? Like, what kind of advice would you give?
Yeah, no, great question. And when people say that, like, oh, that's a great question, you know, Nick, that's usually trying to be a weasel. But it is a great question. You know, and I thought about it because, you know, one of, I think, again, going back to not knowing until you're in that predicament. You know, we look at leadership in a at least I did. I shouldn't say we. I looked at it as a, you know, in a very vertical hierarchy. The leader has all the answers. Leader better be, it's the leader, whatever it is in the food chain, makes the decisions that make or break us. And what I experienced in Mogadishu, in this quick backstory, we get inserted on October 3rd. Chalk 4 does. I'm the chalk leader, and the senior guy. I'm in charge, and we get on the ground, and literally in 30 seconds of being in combat, we're in the wrong spot. We got a lit urgent casualty. We had no comms with the commander, and we're in a major firefight, like just like that. And those are, 4 problems that, as for me, the leader, I couldn't solve. Like I couldn't solve them all at once. I was taught, and I believed at the time, Matt, this all hinges on you. You, the staff sergeant, you, the chocolate, is all on you. And I have told this story a million times to people. Certainly it's scary. There's no doubt about it. I mean, for me, couldn't talk about anybody else. I was very scared. That was, being shot at was a very unnatural act. But it wasn't paralyzing, but it was scary, of course. And, I'm trying to figure out, like, man, I got to do something as a leader. But I don't even know where, I don't know where to even plant the flag to start. And that's when there was this moment on the battle, that very, very profound to me, where I'm like, man, I'm getting nervous. And if I don't make a decision, something, I'm going to lose control. I will lose control. Like, it's all going to go haywire. And that's when something caught my attention, literally, like caught my attention on the battlefield. And I looked over and I saw, had a glimpse of what everybody else was doing. And I saw my 2 team leaders. I could see Casey Joyce, Sergeant Casey Joyce, and Sergeant Jim Telsher, on 2 sides of the road, and they're just making it happen. And it is. I wish I could convey to the listeners how profound that was, because they were 22-year-old, 23-year-olds in the mix, 25-meter battle, and they've got every weapon system engaged. They're throwing grenades. They fired the law. We had laws where they're firing the law, and they're doing all this stuff. And I realized, they're running this battle. Those guys, those young men, they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do, which is tremendously important, because I'm not giving them any guidance. The last thing I said to them was 30 seconds, we're on the plane, but they're doing it. And that kind of made me realize, all right, Matt, your piece of this puzzle is to prioritize and focus on the immediate issues that you're facing, which is a casevac, of your wounded soldier, and everything else will work. And the I guess the punchline, guys, is, what I realized as a leader was that, leadership isn't on the masthead. Casey Joyce was the leader for a moment. Jim Telsher was the leader. Scott Galentine, was a leader. Any of my soldiers at any moment on that battle literally was the point man, so to speak, of that fight. And that's good. That's okay. And, that gets into the essentials of teamwork and all the, deeper thoughts about leadership. But I learned in a hurry, this isn't a one-man show. It's certainly not for Matt Eversmann. This is about understanding, I'm sort of the quarterback. Hate to use that analogy, but I'm kind of the quarterback. But the blind side guy, tackle or guard has got an important role to do, and if they're doing it well, that buys me time. And that, I think, was my takeaway. That's what saved the day for Chuck 4 was it wasn't Matt Eversmann. It was the rest of those guys doing their job unbelievably well, given the circumstance. And let's face it, they knew less than I knew what was going on, but they did exactly what they were trained to do, and then some, to a really high standard, with almost no guidance. And I think back, like, man, I mean, it was almost autopilot, and I don't want to talk myself completely out of the picture from I was just there, because that's a weasel thing to say too. But I realized that at that moment on the battlefield in a gunfight, I'm like, no, the driver, your medic, your whomever, they're going to be the center of gravity during this fight, and that's okay. Let them be in charge. Let them do their thing. And when the medic says, "Hey, Sergeant, we've got to get him out now," he's the commander, and I'm like, "That's cool. That's why it doesn't matter if he's an E3. All right, now on the masthead leader, figure out how we're going to do that. Follow this kid's guidance, and let's get him involved." And that's how we got Todd Blackburn, evacuated. Was not because Matt Eversmann was a great, smart problem solver, Patton standing up on the battlefield, because had the wherewithal to listen to, the guys that were, and I keep going back, that center of gravity. I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Let's do it. And
Yeah.
we go.
That's great advice. Because I feel like if you were to micromanage every single thing that was going on, you'd almost be counterproductive to what, I mean, you got to put trust in others. That's like, I think that's the biggest thing I learned was like, you trust everybody with your life. Like at any moment,
Yeah.
my life is in your hands. You just kind of gotta.
You got a job, and your job is not to worry about what this other dude's job is.
Right.
And luckily I did more reading in Afghanistan than I've done probably my entire life. But one of those books was Pete Blaber's The Mission, the Men and Me, and he talks about listening to the guy on the ground, and that was relatively early into the deployment, and it was kind of already a thing I did to some degree anyway. But one of my co-team leader, he had read the book too, and so having read a lot of books like that, both of us, we employed a lot of that. But it helped the whole concept of listening to the guy on the ground, right? Like you're not the medic, you don't know what's going on with Blackburn, so that medic, like, you got to trust what he says. And we tried to instill that in our Joes, and there's really only one Joe we couldn't trust. The other ones were good, and so we just, you start out convoy in Afghanistan. My first couple convoys, the gunner makes a noise. I'm like, what? And he's like, let's come to an agreement. I'll let you know if you need to know. And I was like, yeah, that's a damn good position to take. I was like, you do that. I'm not going to worry about noises you're making or what. I'm like, you tell me if I need to know. And that was one of those trust your guys, listen to the guy on the ground. So what
Yeah. No, and I just throw in for a second to make my eyes light up. After I retired in 2008, and I had a couple of jobs out in the civilian professional world, I gave Pete Blaber's book to all of my bosses.
yeah,
Like I did, I've given that book away to so many people, and we'll talk about what we should read and shouldn't read, but that book, that had a big impact on me, and for all the obvious reasons. Hey, it's Pete Blaber, amazing guy, stud,
right.
and his pedigree is incredible. But the lessons from the Mission, the Men and Me are timeless. And of all the leadership books I've finally gotten around to reading out here, I put his at the top. That was a great one. Everybody should read that book, whether you're a veteran getting out, or if you happen to be a civilian professional, that's going to have that. Read that book.
Absolutely.
It's well written, and it's sexy too, because it's Delta stuff.
Yeah, but hell yeah.
But it is all. But it's so common sense, logic, and it just, to me, it really resonated with me. Of all the other books, and not that all the other ones are bad but Pete's was a good one.
Yeah. All right, so Battle of Mogadishu and all your lessons. So that's done. You come back to the United States, and now what happens of Matt Eversmann? I feel like that's the untold story, right? You're gonna have to call Jerry Bruckheimer and then do the rest of it.
Yeah, so that's where surreal world comes in. But to back up, we came back. I'd never come back from war before.
Right.
I don't know. I was just talking to somebody literally this afternoon. I said, when we came back, when we finally got back to Fort Benning, reintegrating one company out of the battalion, who's just been this spectacular firefight that the whole world knows about now. I mean, it was so dramatic.
Yeah.
and bringing this group back into the fold, so to speak, is a challenge. And let alone, young men dealing at the time, all male force in the Rangers. Um, you know, Listen, we lost teammates. I mean, this is the first time most of us had dealt with death. I mean, 6 Rangers were from Bravo Company were killed, which I know as we get into the post 9/11 world, that number, while dramatic, it wasn't like some of these, people lost 12, 15, 20 people in Fallujah, but
Yeah.
in the day at the time, it was so profound. And they're like, yeah, take a 4-day weekend and we'll see you on Tuesday, and we're like, okay,
Jesus.
I guess that's what
Oh,
happens. You come back and you did a 4-day weekend, like, hey, 4-day weekend, and off you go. And in fairness to the command, they didn't know any better. They honestly didn't know any better. And so this process of integrating back into, let alone the formation, let alone normal life, was nobody told me. It certainly didn't tell me anything about what that was going to be like. Listen, I remember driving on Fort Benning, shortly after being back, and I'm driving. I had an apartment off post, and shockingly, and you all would get this. You know how 18 wheelers, and they've, here we are 20, 23, 30 years later, but it used to have that big metal plate on the back of the cab, and
yeah.
the metal hook of the trailer would hang into the hook on the back of the 18 wheeler, so the metal on metal contact. Well, when that thing hits a pothole, at 70 miles an hour, it sounds exactly like an RPG
Oh,
hitting
geez.
a Humvee. And I can remember driving down, I-85, getting off post, and a tractor trailer passing me and hitting a bump. And my God, I'm driving off the road.
Wow.
But that sense of, the sound, it's
Yeah.
a whoa, I can remember pulling off at like exit 4, and I'm like, my heart's beating. I'm like, holy shit. Wow. How long is this going to happen? Like that
Yeah.
idea of no one, and it seems in this day and age, it seems silly, but things like that, I remember being like, holy mackerel, man, I'm fucked up. I gotta figure, like, whoa, how do you adjust to all this? And again, at the time, the guidance was basically muscle through, put your shoulders into it.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we all did. And again, that's not an indictment on any commander. But I can, that incident, that instance, I remember, just like we're talking right now. I'm like, yeah, wow, okay. And so you're like, I guess that's just the way it is, and off
Yeah.
we, but I stayed in, and I remember thinking, I could get out and go back to school, finish my degree, and that would be sort of the prescribed remedy. But I also remember thinking, I had this very, very, and profound sounds so dramatic, I know, but I had this very profound sense of loyalty. I loved being a part of that unit. I loved, even though there were a lot of, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly, and come back from battle and deal, hearing everybody talk about the failure in Somalia and all that stuff, but wanted to scream out like, no, you guys just don't understand. We did it. We did a good job. We did that mission. It was hard.
Right.
It was tough, but man, if you could, I'm talking to you all like I'm talking to the crowd. If you could have seen these men, I'm just talking about one little group, the 13 guys on Chalk 4, let alone the whole rest of the task force. And I'm like, if you could have just seen that, you would have been so proud. You would have been like, man, these guys did it. They did their job in the worst situation. And anyway, to me, that was worth staying around for. That was truly like, I'll do it again. Like I'll do it again, and I'll make up for any mistakes I might have made, and maybe I can pass something on. And again, it sounds a little self-righteous, maybe a lot self-righteous, but to me as a young ranger, I'm like, no, this community is there's nothing like it, and I want to stick around it as long as I can.
Well, and again, so I'm about to transition out in the next, well, it's in the balance, but probably within the next year or slightly more. Of course, a year from now, I could say I'm going to finish up 20, so who knows? But point is that in my mental preparation transition out, I mean, I have a lot of route clearance knowledge, how to clear explosives off of footpaths and the road. What the hell am I going to do with that in the civilians? So what I'm saying is, you've had this experience, not to mention, training and other leadership experiences that you don't need war to experience. And so it's this kind of thing of like transitioning out, you start over. Now I'm lucky in the reserve because I already have a solid civilian career that'll be what it is, and the rest of the knowledge is laid to waste. But it's like here you are, and so I get that like I can at least do something with this knowledge by staying in and handing it to those other people. So it's a dilemma that makes and a choice that makes a lot of sense to me, especially the more we talk to other veterans. So I have outside of my own experience to reflect on. So you stayed in. Now I know you became a first sergeant. Were you a first sergeant Ranger bat, or did you transition out of Ranger? Because I don't know how all that works, all the details. I
Yeah,
know.
no, I didn't either at the time. But you know what? The kind of Army 101 and maybe Ranger Regiment 10.5, 101.5. Nobody wants to leave. In
Yeah.
general, people don't want to leave. They're like, I want to stay here. And there's this funny thing about promotion boards, from E7 to E8, where they're like, hey man, you've got to do some administrative time. You've got to see a little more. And so in the Ranger Regiment, we're like, all right, great. I'll just go to the S3 shop. I'll work, and
Yeah.
I'll go be the ops NCO. Well, unfortunately, it's not just Matt Eversmann that wants to be the ops NCO, but it's like every other seven, in the unit. So there's stuff like cordwood,
Yeah.
and you and I'm not the only one. You're like, I don't care. I don't want to get promoted. I'll stay. And sooner or later, you have a mentor that says, hey, listen, jackass, you can always come back. You got to go out. You got to see the rest of the Army. You got to go do something else, or you're going to be waiting here till you're like 90 to be a first sergeant. And you're like, big sad face with crocodile tears. And so I had a job lined up at West Point, and I was like, this will be cool. Like this will be, future leaders of the Army. I'll go up to West Point, and that'll be kind of fun, and help these cadets learn to be lieutenants. And I had this whole thing locked in. And shortly before I was getting ready to leave, I get called into the regimental sergeant major's office, and he says to me, and I understand it, totally. He's like, hey, Sergeant Eversmann, you ever heard of the Army War College? I'm like, no, Sergeant Major, I have no idea what you're talking about. So like, freaking going to Penn State or something. Like, where's Army War College? The long story, not so long, was it was kind of in tone that there was a better fit for the West Point job with another E7, from First Ranger Battalion, who needed to do some family maintenance, and that would be a really good place. I was single at the time, and he's like, there's a really good job in the ops department at the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, that kind of has your name on it. So what do you think? And it wasn't that. Again, I don't say that. Pardon me. I don't say that to, there was no nefarious plot. It was a very in-kind conversation. And I'm like, well, that sounds cool too. So I wound up going to the Army War College to get my administration, billet filled. And along comes this dreadful event called 9/11. And I'm like, holy fuck, man! I'm at the Army War College, and we're going to war. And
Oh
as
yeah.
as life plays out in all of our lives, everyone who's listened has been in a similar situation like this. I had just met a girl. Um, in fact, I had just become engaged, shortly before this,
That was,
9
yeah,
eleven.
I was gonna ask about the relationship. Can we take a pause and ask about that relationship a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess one, like, how did you meet? And then we'll start with that.
Yeah, so here I am at the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And the wonderful thing about that was it's 90 miles from Baltimore, Maryland. And
Okay.
in Baltimore, Maryland, at the time, one of my dearest friends, fraternity brother, lived. And all of a sudden, I'm not on a George cycle. I'm not on it. I don't even have TA 50. I've got a total admin get over job. So I am making up for lost time. I am playing just a shit ton of golf with my buddy down in Baltimore. And every weekend, I mean, I'm like, this is what life is really like. You get to go and have weekends and you can go out on school nights and, it's the administrative life of the military. Anyway, I was set up on a blind date, and since my wife is not in here now, who is this girl in question? She stalked me for a long time, and I had sworn that I would never get married while I was on active duty. And in all seriousness, that first of all, that is true. Everything I've said, totally true. She stalked me. However, um, you know, to back up a second, my time in the Ranger Battalion, uh, going back, 10 whatever years before, was the first time I had ever seen soldiers that I knew, good friends, get divorced. And I know
Yeah.
it sounds like, Matt, what rock were you living under? But when I say it, I saw people get divorced because of the job, not because someone did, had
Right.
an open game, not because somebody did something dash, although that again, the knuckleheads do that stuff. But in general, I
Yeah.
saw really good couples break because of the stress of this job. And I had this theory that, you can be a really good door kicker, overused term. You can be a really good operator. You could be the great ranger, or you could be a really good husband and father. But it's excruciatingly painful and difficult from a single guy's perspective to do them both.
Oh yeah, I had the same
Oh, right.
mentality. Yeah,
I
I had the
mean,
same
that
mentality.
truly was, and again, this is just Eversman's little, my myopic view of the world. And so that's when I said, well, I wouldn't put anybody through this. I'm not going to do it. And
Yeah.
lo and behold, here I am, meet this girl, fall in love, and wonderful gal, just absolutely the sunshine of my life. And then 9/11 happens. And I remember shortly after, couple of months, as things are starting to percolate, and I get a call from a guy at back in the Ranger Regiment, said, "Hey, um, we need you. We'd like you to come back and be a first sergeant." And I remember sitting there saying, "Well,
Uh,
I literally just got engaged. Like I literally just got engaged to a girl who knew nothing about the military." And I'm like, I, I'm like, can I think about it like overnight? And I remember there was that moment, there was that pause on the phone. And as soon as I heard that pause, I knew like that door just shut. Like, they,
yeah.
and again, I say that not knocking on the regiment. I get it. I totally do. But, they were kind of like, you know, hey man, we got other people that want to come right now, and
Yeah.
saying I need a little time, and I understand. I truly do. I have no regrets about my decision. I understand it, but that was one of those moments where I'm like, going back, it's a wartime mission. Like, the Eversman comfort is not, the number one thing here, and I was okay with that. I'm like, whatever the Army needs of me, I'll do. And certainly, listen, don't get me wrong, I want to go to the show. I want to go back. Our nation needs it, but I can't, I can't leave tomorrow. I just can't. And right or wrong, good, bad, or who knows, all people in the eyes of the beholder. But it wound up working out the way it was supposed to be. And, I wound up eventually going to the 10th Mountain Division to be a first sergeant in Alpha Company 431 of the 2nd Brigade Combat Team, and did a blissful 15 months, during the surge in Iraq, which was 0607 was just again a shitty time to be
Yeah.
anywhere, in the Arabian Peninsula, and you all know as much as anybody listening that's been there, it was tough. So we all got our pieces and we did our things. But again, I don't mean to build this up to like there was such a dramatic, hey, you got fired or you didn't do something right or wrong. But, I realized at the time my priority, while always was fulfilling the mission of the Army, in this particular situation, I had another body to contemplate. And
Yeah.
how do I make this kind of win-win for everybody? And the 10th Mountain wound up being the right call.
Yeah. That makes the balance is hard.
Oh,
And I I mean, I reenlisted and then found out I was deploying not even a year later. And I had reenlisted really for the TRICARE.
yeah.
And I was starting to really enjoy the unit changed that I was in, starting to really enjoy it. And but when I started the military, I wanted to deploy single, and I deployed with a wife and a daughter. And but I look back and I think I handled the deployment in a good way differently than if I was single. Um,
Oh, absolutely.
so that,
I mean,
but there, yeah,
jump
that
in on that one, Sam. But I'm with you. I apologize for jumping in, but you're speaking my game. I get
yeah,
it.
yeah. So I totally get the balance, and now I'm making slightly different decisions now for similar reasons, having a family, wife, all that. I mean, if I was single, with the stuff going on right now, this day and age, with Europe and Middle East again, obviously there's going to be that part of me, like most red-blooded American men, where we're like, it is some of that chest beating that's just in your blood, and you're like, let's go. But I'm not singing that same tune because I strongly believe that kids, and I'm not speaking ill to anybody that is leaving or
Yep,
but it's my turn, it's my time to train my soldiers at home. Is how I say it.
Hmm.
And
absolutely.
everyone's path is different. So if you're in a similar situation to me and you're headed over there, I'm not dogging you. Again, everyone's path is different, but for me, I don't think it's my deal to go back over there, at least not right now, or at least that I'm been made aware of. So it's that I totally get. I understand a lot of the situations that you've been in actually. Uh,
Oh,
so yeah, that's that pause on the phone though. Yeah, it's like it's that saying, if there's doubt, there is no doubt, and that's where they're
yeah.
like, oh,
No,
man,
exactly.
Hmm.
Well said.
yeah,
And and listen, I struggle with that. I struggle with that for a long time. As a man, as a ranger, as a soldier, as a husband, all this kind of stuff. That again, there's no playbook. Nobody,
no,
needs of the army, needs of the army, and
yeah,
of course, yes. And you don't want to speak out of both sides of your tongue. But like one of the things for me, and to this day, I think back, um, when somebody reaches out on like fucking whatever social media, I'm on the
yeah,
social media thing, and like, oh, I remember me, and you're like, yeah, I don't really remember everybody, but you're like, all right, and then I stop and I think, I'm like, man, I hope I did this guy right. Like, I hope I treated him, a young married, a 20-year-old married kid with a
mm,
like all you start going through this mind, and
yeah,
it's easy for a lot of people, I think, to be like, oh well, it's very binary, make the decision, that's it, it's all black and white. And I'm like, now as a husband and father, I'm like, it's not, it's just not there's
yeah,
intangibles, variables, and it, in one sense, it shouldn't be, but the humanity side of it is, of course there is.
Yeah.
Of course there is a difference. And I got to keep one kid here after dinner, on a Friday night to fucking, clean the arms room. The single knucklehead that I know is a jackass that I love, but I'm like, guess what? You know what? You can wait to go to the strip clubs a couple hours. You're gonna go, you can go do this, but let's let the kid with the wife and
Yeah,
2-month-old go home, because
not
Yeah.
wrong.
that's just the right thing to do. Like that,
Yeah.
just you know, and
Mhm.
that isn't always. It certainly wasn't always presented to me like that, And again,
Yeah.
it's in that slippery slope. I know, and there's some sergeant major listening that's like, "You're an asshole, Eversman," and blah blah blah, and it shouldn't matter. Like, yeah, I got it, sergeant major, but it was my call, and I just hope I truly, truly do. I hope that I treated people fairly, and I hope I did the kids right. And I tell you honestly, I hope I did the married kids, and I say kids with affection, but I hope I
Yeah.
did the soldier. I hope I did them right. Sometimes you got to make a hard one, but I hope when I did, I hope I took it all in. I don't know that I did, but here we are across the bear.
So, what soft skills did you learn from the military that helped you, that you kind of carried on? Because kind of like what Sam was saying earlier with, when we transition out, I was either infantry or I was route clearance or I did this. And how does that transition to civilian life? Was there any soft skills that you did bring with you, or you think
Like time management or
Yeah,
yeah.
no, well,
leadership.
that is the eternal one of several eternal questions, and nobody. Again, I can only, I'm giving you all dated. I retired in 2008. Even though I say, yeah, I just retired. My wife's like, dude, that was 15 years ago. I'm like, oh, but I can remember very, very vividly. And you said it earlier, Sam, about yeah, I do route clearing and this, and how's that translate to the civilian world and all that stuff? Because that's what you think. It's all very cause
Yeah.
and effect. I did this. This is my skill set. I can go out and be a cop or a gun carrying world or not. And if it's the not, I don't know anything.
Mhm.
So what I realized though, after when I got my first job, which was in healthcare, interestingly enough, to me anyway, in a nerdy, geeky way, what I realized was that there are a couple of things that I fell back on from my military experience that served me very, very well. And the first thing was it wasn't fast roping and parachuting and being an expert marksman and a sniper and all that shit and going to SEER school and all that stuff, or even going to combat. What I remarked, what I found myself going back on was my time on the staff.
Mm.
Most unsexy, unglamorous, everybody hates you being on the staff. But
Oh,
what I learned, and this particularly in the third Ranger Battalion, what I learned was this idea of process. And God forbid we say it out loud, I learned management. I believe personally, if you're a good guy or gal and you're legitimately, focused on being a good soldier, you're going to learn leadership. You're going to learn from every person you meet, every experience, every interaction. You're going to learn the personalities. I say this all the time, and I'm not the only one. I got a PhD in people, from my military experience.
oh
But what
yeah.
I got back on was learning how the staff runs, learning how planning goes, learning the process, and get back to Dave Grange, how to think, not what to think, and understanding that there is a sequence that, regardless of industry, it's agnostic of whatever profession, but there's a process that you need to learn and you need to be an expert at it. You need to Matt Eversman, need to understand how this works, how the thought process of planning a training exercise, just think of the most, how do we run a PT test for 150 people? Because, out here, most of us don't have to manage 150 people. But if you can, and we're all joking and we're nodding, PT, that's PT, go out there and here's a stopwatch and a whistle. But you realize, like, no, if you're going to do it well, that requires some thought, that requires a lot of shit that has nothing to do with going from safe to semi or putting on a tourniquet.
Yeah.
It all requires thought and understanding of the process. And again, I feel like I just saw fire for the first time, but I go back in very broad terms. The skills I think are most applicable out here were the administrative things, how to counsel a soldier, how to do the monthly performance counseling, which
Yeah.
for the life of me, I don't understand why we don't do it out here very well. But in the military, and certainly in 3rd Ranger Battalion, I got to tell you, we did it really, really well. I mean, it was, you talk about there's the science of it and there's the art. And we did the art really well, certainly in my platoon. We did it. And so those kinds of things, and I didn't realize it at the time till I got out, like that's important things to know. And I would tell you, any young enlisted, whether you're a commissioned or not, but let's talk about a young enlisted soldier, you've seen how process works. Monkey see, monkey do. And understand that, stop, take a breath, drink some water, take a knee, think about it a little bit. Those are the kinds of, that's the bushel barrel of shit that you have been exposed to and you've learned, and hopefully in a good unit that did it well, that you can apply anywhere, industry agnostic out here. And so there's not just one, I guess to answer your question, there's not just one that like, oh, I'm a really good listener or I'm a really good fill in the blank. But, listen, for years, I don't have it right now because my job at the moment doesn't really require it. But until I started doing my own thing, I kept a Ranger handbook in my desk all the time. And why? Because I could look at the op order and I could look at the annexes, which is gloriously unsexy. Who wants to do the boat movement annex or the river crossing thing or any of that mundane shit that none of us think is fun or exciting, but it's got to be done. Who makes sure that we got all the ropes and all the waterproof, all that. Those are the things I started realizing and gained steam over time. Like that's something that a young sergeant can bring out anywhere, whether you're going to work at a construction company or work at a bank, it doesn't matter. The process and understanding the process of it. The leadership piece you already got, I would suggest for the good kids. You common sense, the 5 principles of patrolling, planning, reconnaissance, common sense, and President Reagan can't think, planning, reconnaissance,
risk assessment. Was that in there?
Anyway, I'm probably too many bourbons, but planning, reconnaissance, control, security, and common sense. Those 5 principles. If you apply that to your process-driven world, which everything out here is, you've got a voice at the table. You can say something that is like, we have violated one of those somewhere, and you, the young soldier, know it. And I would tell you, most importantly, it's probably that last one, the common sense. That's what soldiers bring. That's what I learned from the military. A lot of the, hey, sir, well, what if? And it just pisses everyone off. But what if, we don't have, case in point, here's a perfect case in point. Real world story. Here we are, October 3rd, 1993, in the fight. Everything's going on. And you know what? We're running out of ammo. Literally. And this wasn't just Chalk Fort. We're running out of ammo everywhere. Because this fight that was going to be 30 minutes is now hours and hours. And there's a lot of bad guys. And we're shooting a lot of bullets. And listen, I got out of the city that night passing around a 9mm, in a Humvee. Hey, there's one over here. Give me, and you're literally passing around a 9mm. And I've told this story to people before. No one ever talked about a hot ammo resupply because who runs out of bullets?
Yeah.
No, I mean, again, not to be, I don't know, grandiose about it, but all of a sudden we're like, fuck, man, we're running out of bullets. And the guys that were at the crash site overnight, they're really running out of bullets. And nobody had a plan for that. Nobody thought that could possibly happen. Nobody what if
Yeah.
that. And you know how they solved it? They're going back there. The 160th guys go back to the FARP, and they're getting water, and they're getting gas and reloading the miniguns and everything. And some young crew chief runs out and takes a 50 cal ammo can, and you all have seen that, the big 50 cal ammo can.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Stuffs it full of saw ammo and 5.56 and some bottles of water, and duct tapes it, and they take back off and they fly over the city, and they're in a gunfight, and they're fucking, doing gun runs, and the rockets are shooting and all this stuff. And they fly over where, the good, where the friendlies are. And this kid just dumps, a 50 cal ammo can out from a flying helicopter, bounces off the street a couple times. That's the hot ammo resupply. Some young E5 or E6, figured it out and was like, hey, necessity is the mother of invention, common sense. And like, we got to do it. All this is bleeding back to the point, I hope, in my mind it is, we've got something to offer from these experiences that we've had, whether in combat or training, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
To realize, like, back to that one leader can't figure it out. It cannot be one guy doing it. So somebody's got to be able to step up and say, hey, man, what happens if this happens? And young soldiers are good at saying, like, hey, what about this, sir? And anyway, I think that's beautiful.
Do you remember Kessler during that? It was an op order. Do you remember? All right, so I'll tell you the story real quick, and then we'll go to our next question. But you saying this is like, this story is a perfect example of that. And so we had this captain, and so we didn't often do just platoon missions. We usually did this complicated thing with NATO. But anyway, so we're just doing a platoon mission. The captain's going to be on it, and so he's doing the op order, and then we're talking about how we're going to go to these A&A outposts, and we're going to give him a bunch of our was it class 3? What was the food we got? Class 4? I'm blanking. Whatever, the random food, Pop-Tarts and all that shit.
Oh, yeah.
And so our
Ribbits.
class 1, yeah. And so we're gonna give him that stuff. And then the guy, so he says, and then this guy Kessler raised his hand. He's like, yeah. And he's like, shouldn't we also like take him a bunch of water too?
Oh.
And then this commander was like look at him like he was an idiot, and he was like you can tell in his head, he's like, that's not part of the plan. And so so he just like didn't even answer. He just rolls on with the op order. And so then when we did the AAR after the mission, they were like, well, what's up with the ANA guys say? And we're like, well, they appreciated all the Pop-Tarts and stuff, but they said, like, really just at the end of the day, some water would be nice.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, which I took him seriously when he said it. I was like, yeah, it's probably a good idea. We should do that, especially with all this free water on Bagram. But yeah. So going from there again, just before, because I want to hear about your transition, just before getting into transition, one of my favorite, probably my favorite question of the show is, if you were to go back in time and give yourself advice starting out for your military career or even into the transition, what would that advice be?
Yeah, wow, great one. And again, I say that it's a great one, and I waffle on it in my own mind when I think about, because we're like, oh man, I woulda, shoulda, coulda. If I would have, the life would have been great. I never would have had
never would have met my wife, like, if I didn't.
No, and which is all legit too. I would tell you, aside from like buying Microsoft and Google, Bitcoin,
We haven't had that before.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good one.
in 2008, $100 worth of Bitcoin. I got to tell you, I don't know if I'd be on a podcast right now. I'd probably be like
On a beach.
on the beach in the south of France.
Yeah.
But all that other stuff, in all honesty, I think I would have told a young Private Eversmann a couple of things, and I would have said, first of all, I'm like, Matt, don't be afraid to say yes. Like, you're don't be afraid to say yes. Whatever it is that's offered to you, in this environment, say yes. Try it. Try whatever. If somebody says you should try out for the Rangers, or you should try out for airborne school, or you should get on the OML just do it. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just say yes. Go. Don't be afraid of a new experience. Don't talk yourself out, which is a tremendous Matt Eversmann quality of talking myself out of, good things all the time. And I mean that sincerely. I've talked myself out of some things that, I wish I hadn't, but, say yes, try it. And the follow on to that, men, is there truly is no such thing as failure. And I say that, not to be so wise and I'm such a seer here, but there's no report card at the end of this. The only report card, depending on your theology, is what happens at the end. But everything will open up opportunities. You know what? And you know what? If you didn't meet the grade, didn't meet the standard, it just means that time you weren't prepared for it, and it might be your own fault. It might not. It could have been circumstantial, subjective shit of other people looking at you. But just do your best and try it. And if it doesn't work out, that really is okay. And the assumption, of course, is you're giving your best and all that. You're not mailing it in. But don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid. And the people say, oh, he tried and he failed. He tried out for SFAS and didn't make it because he whatever. You're no less of a man or a woman. You tried it, it didn't work. It wasn't your time. And that's okay. That truly is okay. Keep charging, keep chopping, keep doing it. Come back harder the next time, whatever it is. But don't be afraid of that. So those two things I think are kind of what resonate with me is don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to try. Because trust me, there are plenty of people that out there are like, I wish I had the balls to even give it a whirl. And they didn't. So they'll never know. The Teddy Roosevelt, it's a Teddy Roosevelt Sorbonne speech, that they didn't have the balls, they didn't try it, they'll never know. And the second thing is, what? What's the worst thing that happened? You tried it and you didn't make it? And, okay, try it again. Because listen, when you get out here, and I'm the king of failure. I will tell you, not to speak out of both sides of my mouth, I have not made the mark on a lot of things. I mean, I haven't, and it's inevitable. Listen, you come out here and get a job at fill in the blank company, you're either going to retire from there, you're going to leave on your own, or you're going to get fired. Let it go if we're going to be like little, touchy-feely. But, that's how it works,
Yeah.
It's going to change. Company's going to downsize. And guess what? There you go. Good guy. Love you, but enjoy, whatever your next career is. So don't be afraid of that. Truly, don't be afraid. That's not a blemish on you. And again, the idea is that you're the person that is trying hard and you're giving it your all, always, like a good young soldier. Don't be afraid of it. And it's hard because our egos are involved and nobody likes to not see their name on the winner's circle, but that's okay because there's another one for you. There's another one for you. And there's another one. And I could bore you to tears with all the other ones for you out here. But I would say that, as emphatically as I could, say yes. Say yes. Even if you're not even confident, say yes, try it. And if it doesn't work, that's okay. You know what? That is absolutely positively all right. At least now you know. You know what? Yeah. It could be you don't, Matt Eversmann, have the aptitude to be an economics and French major. It's not like for years I'm like, man, fuck, I suck. I can't believe I failed out of college. It stings. For years it stung. And I'm like, wait a second, I had no business doing that. I shouldn't feel bad about it. I could not, it doesn't compute. It's like using explosives. I can read the formulas, but I don't have that aptitude of tying the Yuli knot, the whole detonator, the det core, like all that stuff. I'm like, I watch it. It makes sense. I can't do it. I never could. I truly, Honestly, demo is one of those things like electricity out here in the real world. I can read a book, but it just doesn't compute. So why am I even trying? You know what? When shit goes wrong at my house, in the big gray box, in the closet, I'm like, you know what? Not even going to fuck with it. I'm just going to call somebody to do that because this is a non-starter, and that's okay. I'm not a horrible guy. I don't know how to do it. I don't understand it. So
Yeah.
let's and that kind of, I hope in there is the answer.
Yeah.
Um, in my mind it makes sense, but I
Yeah.
don't be afraid of it. Don't, and anybody that says you're a failure is fucked up anyway, because they're just chicken shit, and
Oh yeah.
you know what? And again, I don't mean to grandstand, so I apologize, but those would be the two lessons I would say.
No, no, that's
Solid.
that's great advice.
Yeah.
And to kind of bring it full circle, because with the first question you were kind of getting into this, but how was your transition? And then to tag on to that, like, did you find something, bigger than yourself, whether it's being a father or a husband, to kind of devote yourself to? Because, most people, they kind of are missing that sense of a bigger purpose than themselves when they transition out. So,
Yeah, man. And listen, this gets deep in a hurry, and I sound like Dr. Phil.
We're good with it. Love it.
I've been,
hit us with it.
15 years. I've been wrestling with this idea, not just for an answer, a good pithy answer, but really trying to figure it out. And kind of starting at the beginning. Um, Transition's hard for me, and I should preface this, folks, by saying I'm one guy giving you Matt Eversmann's experience.
Mhm.
Um, and not to be, oh, no one told me, but it starts with this idea of identity. No one told me you've got to come up with a new identity. And when we hear that, as I'm
Mm.
sure some people listening right now are like, you're fucked up. I can't believe you're saying that. I'm a ranger, and I'm not saying that, we just, hit the delete button and, dump the hard drive. But this idea of what we did while we were in this gun club is profoundly important. And every single one of us contributed to a national mission, and particularly in the post 9/11 years. I don't care what your billet was, what your job was, what your rank was, you contributed to the national mission. And that is beyond, you'll never have that opportunity outside of the military to do that again. You just won't. I mean, unless you get to be president or somebody with that kind of strategic influence, you're generally speaking, you'll never do that again. And that's okay. But understand, you got to kind of figure out, who do you want to be? And it's not like, hey, I used to be a funny guy and now I'm a serious. It's not that superficial stuff, but it is this idea of, what is Matt ever, if I'm using me, kind of, who do I want to be? Am I the Black Hawk Down guy? Is that going to carry me for the rest of my life? Or is it I was a first sergeant or a ranger or whatever identity we all had? And again, it doesn't matter. Petroleum specialist doesn't, fill in the blank. That doesn't matter. That is over. That generally speaking will be over, unless of course, you go out to be a petroleum specialist at, you know, mobile or, fill in the blank. But in general, for most of us, it's like, you're going to have a new identity. And that's a good thing, and it allows you, this transitioning veteran, to figure out what do you want to be? Not what do you want to be when I grow up. I want to be a banker or a lawyer or something. That's part of it. But what's your focus going to be? What's your new national mission? And for me, as I said at the beginning, honestly, and it took me a while to realize it, and I learned it the hard way, was my focus has to be on being a good, and when I say good, meaning as good as I can be,
Yeah.
husband and a father. You know what? I got out, I did all the wrong things. I was chasing money. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be, having this glorious world of jumping out of airplanes and blowing shit up and, leading great, hard charging kids. I'm out in this new world, and I've got to figure out what it is that's most important. Again, I keep going back to the family. For me, I realized, listen, you can make money. And I know that sounds really trite, but fucking just Google it. You can find plenty of people with high school diplomas that have made millions and millions and maybe even billions of dollars. Money is fungible. You can always make more money. That is absolutely empirical. You can promise you, put your mind to it, you can make money. So separate money from success, and think about what's most important to the inner sanctum, the inner circle of you, the veteran. And that's got to be your family. Whether you're married or not, doesn't matter. But, your family. And then you start expanding those circles. If you get that part focused, if I believe, like Kung Fu like focus, like that's everything I do. It's got to be for my family. The expanding concentric rings of that target will become clearer and clearer. And going back to there's no failure, listen, I grew up, I'm 57 years old, I grew up in industrial age thinking with my parents. You have a job, you do it for 20 years, you get a pension, and then you retire. Or in this case, do the military for 20 years, get out, get another job, do it for 20 years, put your shoulders into it, and you'll retire. And I realized, well, that mindset is antiquated. That's not how it works. You go, maybe you blow with the wind a little bit, I don't know, and that's not a bad thing. But your ground has to be something important to you. And for me, I think it's your family. After that, it's like going back to that, say yes, and don't be afraid of failure. If an opportunity comes up in something that you maybe know nothing about, then so what? Try it. And I use this example, and give me a little bit of rope here, guys. But let's just say you're a young E4, E5. You're a good kid, good young guy or gal. Maybe you deployed, maybe you didn't. You're a truck driver. You drove Hemmets and whatever the fuck all around Iraq and Afghanistan and Somalia, and you get out, and you got to start this new life. There's no shame in getting a job as, a driver for UPS, put on a brown suit. I would say if you're a good guy or gal, my guess is you will advance in the ranks rapidly, given the fact that everything is so mediocre out here and the average is truly, the bar is low.
Yeah.
I would tell you, I would challenge you, if you're listening, stop for a second, take your stock and think, what are you doing to make your situation better? What are you doing to make your company better? Whatever it is, and again, fill in the blank, does not matter. It comes down to this. You either help the company make money or you help the company save money. And soldiers are really good at efficiencies. So if you can come out and start looking at whatever situation you're in right now and think, how can I make this better? The cream's going to rise. And I know it's cliche, but that's going to happen. I didn't know this. I listened to all the memes and, pardon me, all the shit about, nobody cares about how many push-ups you can do. Sit on your hands and, listen up and, blah, blah, blah. And I did. And for like the first 6, 7, 8 months, pardon me, I'm watching just gross negligence happen. And it has nothing to do with the industry. It has everything to do with the way where this company was handling its people. And I'm like, finally, stop. Stop the madness. This is done. I'm going to say something. We're letting clients down because we're not prepared when we get on a client site to do fill in the blank healthcare stuff. How about this little thing we call PCCs and PCIs?
Hell yeah.
Any E3 knows, like, hey, before we go out tomorrow, let's check and make sure that all of our blood pressure cuffs are here. Let's make sure we've got all the phlebotomist stuff. And let's let's do a little checklist kind of like those are the things that I learned over time. I'm like, you, the veteran, this young guy or gal who thinks that you have nothing to offer, have so much practical experience to bring out here. And granted, maybe you don't want to be a truck driver forever, and that's cool too. But I'm telling you, you can parlay that. You can do your time, learn the system, learn the language, and you can advance. It's not easy, it's not guaranteed, but if I'm a betting man, I'm telling you, it will happen. You will outshine your competition because of your work ethic. You will do better. And you know what? If the shit isn't working where you are right now, go find another job. You know what? You go do it. There's no failure. Remember,
Yeah.
there's no report card. You can say,
Perfect.
hey, man, let me try this. And so I think those building blocks along the way, and it takes time. I understand. It's not like, hey, I figured it out on day one. It's a lot of trial and error, but it can absolutely happen. People are starving, especially in 2023, where people are like, where the fuck are all the workers? People are like, we need good people. We'll teach you the skills. You just got to go out there and find it. And so anyway, I'm rambling. I apologize about that, but
All right.
No.
I feel true to listen. I worked in healthcare, I worked in the nonprofit world, then I worked in the data management world, and all of them I learned a lot from. But I also realized that none of those. I'm not in any of those industries now because I didn't have any passion for it. I never really understood it, but I could contribute to the people side of the house, and I realized like time to keep moving, keep looking forward, find where that foothold is that wants you. And I'm telling you, they're out there. They are out there. Anyway, I'll shut up and let you keep firing questions.
All right. So fun thing for listeners. So when Nick and I find a lead that we want to interview, we do a preliminary phone call. So you and I spoke a little bit about your transition out on the phone call, and you had mentioned that you were getting out of the army. You had this handshake of a promise, and it did not pan out. I think that's one of those. That's one of those things I learned. Luckily, I learned early on. I've had friends and family learn here and there that you got to get stuff in writing. And so I think that it'd be a good story, I think, for our listeners, especially with those who have not transitioned out yet, as kind of something to have your ear to the ground for.
Yeah, man. Well, listen, it's funny, Tim, as you're saying that, and every time I hear it, because this conversation has come up, my wife and I talk, we laugh about it now, but at the time it wasn't that funny. Um, we have been trained, we have been conditioned as soldiers. Yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am, and the system will catch up to itself, kind of, and it generally speaking does.
Yeah.
you know, when the sergeant major says, "Hey, I'd like you to go to the Army War College instead of that," you're like, "Roger that, Sergeant Major." And it happens. It all works. And I did for the listeners. I was offered a job in Baltimore, Maryland when I retired. Handshake promise, and to me that was as good. I didn't know you had to have a contract. I didn't know.
Well,
I assumed, this is like um,
when you're part of a brotherhood, man's word
yeah.
is a man's word.
I mean, not to be an egregious name dropper, but if General McChrystal told me, hey, Sergeant Eversmann, I need you to do this, you're like, Roger, okay. And in my mind, this was a civilian General McChrystal telling me, hey, come down here, we got a job for you. And I'm like, cool, transition's easy. And we literally we took our one move in retirement and moved back to Baltimore, Maryland, which is my wife's hometown, on the promise of this job. Of course, this is 2008, which for all of you is another story in itself, but I didn't know anything about the housing crisis. I didn't know that interest rates were going to skyrocket, and so we had this house in Fort Drum we couldn't sell, but we needed to move, so we moved down, found a house to rent. Because I got a job. Remember, I got a job, and it's going to be a good pay.
Mhm.
We even talk salary. I'm like, this works. Got our daughter enrolled in a private school in Baltimore. Life is good, and my wife's like, hey man, when are you going to start working? I'm like, soon. They told me to take a couple of weeks, and I say this not to gloss over it, but the punchline of this story is that I finally called the guy out and like, hey man, I need some dough. I'm literally running out of money. And he's like, well, we thought we would have a grant to pay your salary, but that fell through kind of while you were moving. And so you're going to have to come up with, you're going to have to write a proposal to come up with a grant to fund the program that we'd like you to run. And, this is asking a fish to use its feet. I'm like, I don't know how to grant proposal. I'm like, this is fucked up. Truly, but it really happened. Like literally, I'm not making this up. This really happened. And it was this moment, much like that pause, the pregnant pause on the call to come back to the regiment. This was a moment where I'm like, this isn't going to end well. Like this isn't going to work. Like this will not have a happy ending. And I'm glad you brought it up, because this is a point for all of us to remember. Things don't work. They sometimes they don't work out. And the question becomes, how long are you going to bitch and moan about it? No matter how you've been, how egregious the sin against you and how much they screwed you over and all this stuff. End of the day, man, you got tuitions, you got mortgages, you got lights to pay, you got car payments, you got phone bills, you got to come up with something. You can either wallow in it or you can take some action. And to me, I realized, like, okay, bruise to the ego, this sucks, horrible situation, but I need to go out and get a job. And I found a job. And granted, as I said before, I was chasing dough, which sometimes you have to. But you realize, again, this is all part of a continuum. Like, okay, get a job right now to keep the lights on. That's all right. And listen, soldiers know this. Army wives know how to save $1. You can you figure out which bills you can wait on and all that stuff. You're like, I got it. But I do circle back to what I said earlier. You're finding a good rally point, and you get a job, get some dough coming in, whatever it is, and then start working, get some breathing room so you can keep going. And that's what I did. But it happened, and it was a big slap in the face. It was a shot to the ego. Like, how dare they? I was a first sergeant. I just came back from Iraq. All these things that kept bubbling up, and I realized, you know what? That's me. That's on me. That's not on them. That's on me. Fifth principle of patrolling: common sense. I've got to protect myself. I got to be thinking smarter, and I got to start switching the lens, the rear sight aperture of what I'm looking at. But it was hard. And, that was the first moment where I realized, man, this transition's hard, man. It's hard doing it by yourself. It really, really is. And, part of it kind of maybe has to be, because no one can handle, hold your hand through all of this. But man, there's no playbook. There just isn't a playbook, at least that I could see. I remember asking lots of friends, what do I do? What's the next step for me? And they're all like, they're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. So, there is a little bit that you do, and I say this just to the group that's thinking about getting out. You got to be a little prepared to do a lot of this shit on your own. You just have to.
Yeah.
It's not impossible, and it's actually not a horrible thing. But it means now, while you have all this transition time and you're thinking about the plan, which your squad leader and platoon leader and everybody's telling you got to have a plan. No, you got to drill into this like you're planning the next, route clearing mission in fucking Kandahar. You better be, cross your T's, dot your I's, look at your Ranger handbook, all that kind of stuff. And what if the shit out of everything, which I didn't, because I just thought, well, it'll all work out the way it's supposed to because
Yeah.
that's what we're used to, you
Yeah.
know?
They tell you be somewhere and you show up in the right uniform
Yeah.
at the right time. Okay, so you went through some per our conversation, you went through a couple different jobs, and then I think you said you were let go, or we can be brash, fired from. And
Yeah.
your wife basically was like, why don't you consider business for yourself versus going to get another job that you don't want? And I'm paraphrasing, so please correct my
No,
quote.
you're right on, Sam. I mean, 100%. And this is one of these other complexities because it just shows, what a knucklehead I am in one sense.
To the genius of
Um,
wives. Is that what?
yeah, this was Christmas coming up on Christmas of 2018, and I I remember like thinking this is the year I'm going to get a raise. Like, because I've like been working for this company for a couple of years, good salary, thankfully, very good salary. But I never got a raise. And my wife's like, dude, everybody else is getting a raise. Oh, come on, man, the cost of living index. And so over Christmas, I'm like, I'm going to ask for a raise. And I got myself all psyched up. I had it all planned, to talk about the raise. And the day that I was having this conversation, my boss, who I love and wonderful, I can't by any means, I won't use names or companies because they were lovely people and they were doing as best they could. Called me up, kind of preemptive strike, so to speak, and was in tears saying that basically this company, this small startup I'd been working for, missed their sales, prediction by like 30%. I mean, by a lot. Like it was like one of the
Damn.
missed it by a lot. And I had heard, I was on the kind of in the not in the C suite, but just outside of the C suite, and it all looked like it was going well. And to cut to the chase, she's like, Matt, we got to cut, a lot of our force. We got a reduction in force, and we kind of really like you, so we're going to keep you on part time for a quarter, and we'll see how it goes. Well, kind of God love them for it. That was great. The little
Yeah.
half of something is better than nothing, but that was I had a little bit of a runway, but I realized like, man, who knew? And it's not that they're bad people. And it wasn't that
Yeah.
it was bad business, circumstances,
Yeah.
and the long, boring story I found out afterwards of nefarious shit with their lenders that changed because of some federal banking laws. And anyway, though, I found myself like, man, I got to go out and get another job. I got to go, got to keep the lights on. And that was when my wife said, hey, before you rush out to get another job that you're not going to like, maybe we could figure out how to do something on our own. And that was my wife. That was not me. I had no entrepreneurial idea, no thoughts of running my own little company, whatever it was.
Mhm.
Um, but like I kind of stewed about it for a little bit, and I'm like, no, you're right. There is something to be said for the entrepreneurial spirit. And a quick time out, no one ever told me about, hey, you could get out and run your own business.
Yeah.
To me, that that's like, the startup. I'm going to start Tesla, or I'm going to start, Facebook, or whatever it was at the time. You're like, those are smarter people to me. That's something other people do. I couldn't do my own thing. But you realize like, hey man, say yes, and don't be afraid of failure, and see what it goes. The worst thing that can possibly happen is it doesn't work out, and you got to go get a job to get some income. And I know that sounds awfully broad, but really it's the truth. There's a million books written about these people that lost their jobs, started Starbucks, and went through the whole rigmarole, and all of a sudden then they got an idea and off they went. That really is the nature of being an entrepreneur. And for me, I spent all of 2019 working this idea that I thought was absolutely going to take off. And I honestly, I can tell you all that are listening, I didn't make a dime, didn't make a penny in 2019. From this new business, and I was going through our savings, and we, my wife and our partners, we're like, hey, why isn't anybody buying this? Is good stuff, and it was all designed to literally help veterans in transition, but for profit, because we're like, hey, you got to skin in the game, and I'll bore you with that story later. And I remember, coming in the end of 2019, like literally burning holes in the ceiling, like, what am I going to do? Like, what am I possibly going to do to just get some dollars coming in? And I had this truly epiphany where I'm like, wait a second, the people I'm going after, and not to give us all a entrepreneurial 101 course, but I realized, like, maybe I'm fishing in the wrong pond. Maybe what I'm trying to do to help veterans who don't have money to spend could be better utilized if I looked at the people that would like to hire veterans that do have money and spend. So I went from trying to sell a product to what I thought was a needy, not needy in a economic sense, but people that were in need of this information. And I switched over, and I'm like, well, maybe corporations would buy this product. And so I woke up the next day, and true story, and I have a friend who was a HR for a big company in Michigan, and I wrote her a note, and I said, hey, do you got a moment? I'm just curious about how you're working on solving the veteran hiring predicament. And she wrote me right back, and she's like, wait a second, you're helping companies hire veterans? And I'm like, well, I was actually trying to help veterans be marketable to companies. You see where I'm going? And she's like, when can you come up here? And I'm like, well, Ann, you tell me when. My calendar is free. And true story, she's like, well, she threw out a figure. She's like, well, listen, I'd like to hire you. Here's what we'll pay. Maybe you could come up and you could talk to our global HR team about how we can hire vets, because we can't figure out how to do it. And the whole moral of this story was, it was a dramatic 180-degree shift in what I thought was right to what I honestly, selfishly needed. And I realized that was the pond I should be fishing in. And I made more money in January of 2019. I did make a little bit of dough, but not much. But I mean, all of a sudden it's like, whoo, the lights are on. Like, this is good. And we built this great, I was able to change our tactics and refine the plan and sell this product to corporations to help teach HR people how to not only develop a pipeline for hiring veterans, but how to integrate them into the company. And I mean, it was nerdy, geeky stuff, but all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I never in a million years would have thought of it. And of course, pardon me, of course, the 2019 becomes a banner year. I mean, literally, we're pumping in money. And I don't mean like drive a Bentley money, but, to me, I'm like, whoa, as a first sergeant that made 40 grand a year, like, and,
that's the truth.
I all of a sudden we're building good steam, and she's introducing me to people. And all of a sudden I've got clients in Michigan and South Carolina and Virginia and Florida, and we're going well. And then what happens in 2020? COVID hits.
Yeah.
And literally overnight, craters. And as everybody that's listening knows, that just became survival mode for everyone.
Yeah.
But and I say the but, not to be Pollyanna here, the but from it was I was learning as I go. First of all, how to manage my finances, which no one ever taught me. The Army didn't teach me. My parents didn't teach me, and God love them. They never taught me this stuff, but I had to learn, through the famine times how to do it. And I thankfully was in a position where, okay, we can write it out a little bit and we can start figuring out what's the next thing to do. And I'll stop right there just to emphasize the moral of this story to anyone that's listening is that, so many circumstances that are so out of your control are going to change. It's strategic shock, just like on the battlefield. The enemy's got to vote, and every other cliche we use about it, it does happen. And you got to maybe learn it the hard way, or hopefully you'll learn it from a knucklehead like me. But, as you're going, you got to keep learning these lessons. The AARs that you talked about, Sam, you do an AAR and you're like, what worked, what didn't work? I'm making money or saving money. And for us, it was, well, we learned we better save money. And that happened to be really profound for us because we had a really great year in 2019 that when COVID hit, it's like, okay, the bottom didn't drop out for the Eversmann family. We're in a good spot and we can, kind of figure out what's going to be the next pivot. How do we change to the market? And again, I don't mean to go all in like I'm some great business, Warren Buffett kind of guy, but you learn it as you go. And listen, there's bounces and ebbs and flows and peaks and valleys and all that shit. But I do say this. I'll close up my commentary on this sermon with this. For anybody that's thinking about being an entrepreneur, doing your own thing, eat what you kill. It's out there. Whatever it is out there. What you've got to wrestle with and what the person listening to Eversmann's 2 cents, what you've got to wrestle with and digest is, it really is all on you, and you got to be good with that. And if it is, and if you're willing to do that, you're gonna find like it's such a relief. It's such a relief. And it doesn't become, I got to get another job. It becomes, I just got to find where my talents can be best utilized, that I can do something else. And listen, a quick story and I'll shut up is, after all this stuff as, doing my own thing, what I realized for me personally was I don't want to have, I'm not trying to build a business with 5,000 employees or 500 employees or 5 employees. Matt Eversmann, I don't want to manage anybody's happiness. And listen to what I'm saying. When I say don't want to manage I don't want to be the guy that's got to make a decision about, hey, Matt, my kids are sick. I gotta, life has come at me. To me, of course you got to go take care of your family. Of course you got to do that. But unfortunately, if you're our only salesperson, in this 3-man operation and you're out, we can't survive. So I'm going to cut that out of the equation and I'm going to do it all. I want to be a 1-man show. And that's just me. That is just me. But in the whole scheme of what I just said, my understanding was whatever Matt Eversmann does is good for his family. It's going to make money for his family, and I can do it by myself. I'm all in. So if it means selling comic books, I'll do it. If it means, selling lug nuts, I'll do it. If it means making workbooks for an online training company, I'll do that. I'm not afraid to pivot, because again, there's no report card. Oh, well, he started off, selling, old fashioned glasses, and now he's selling, pens. It's like, doesn't matter. Like, that fucking doesn't matter. It's like, are you doing what you're good at and you have a passion for, and you can do it within the constraints that you've set? And anyway, I apologize for going all over the map here, guys,
All
but
right.
No, that's
you know,
great.
it is. I just throw this out. Um, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Listen, I live in South Florida, and I promise this is the last little, sermon I'll give. Well, I probably lied about that, but I live in South Florida. To get legitimately, and listen to this. To get somebody, because it's South Florida, it's the tropics, and your grass grows, your hedges grow. Everybody here has got a pool. Everybody's got a rancher with cement roofs. Lots of cement around here. We need people that will show up every week to cut the grass. Truly, we need dependable people that will come on here and cut the grass and take the lawn clippings. And I'm not talking like, again, Rockefeller here. I'm just talking about the average middle income home. We need people to come do manual labor. If you've got a pickup truck and a lawnmower, you can be successful in South Florida. I'm telling you, you can write your own ticket. And I guarantee you that within months, you will be talking to the car rental place about how to get more trucks and more lawnmowers and more weed eaters. And all of a sudden, you'll be the company commander. Truly, you'll be the company commander of an operation that is going to be generating income. If you can power wash, you can make money in Florida. If you can, skim the pool, you can make money in Florida. And I'm talking good money. We can't find people. And no one ever told me any of this. The trades are so valuable. My gosh, this gets into the whole education world, but it's out there, man. You just got to look around a little bit. And what do we have? Nobody wants to do it, and those that do don't really want to do it that well. So if you're a veteran that has
right.
that ethos,
Solid words.
it's literally, and it's not just in West Palm Beach. It is Raleigh, North Carolina. It's in Richmond, Virginia. It's in Kansas. It is anywhere. You can start out one man in a truck. And I'm telling you, you laugh at me, but I'm telling you, there's always somebody that's looking for perfection and excellence. You can do that because you know how to do that. That's what we learn in the military.
Right. Those soft skills you were talking about transfers to whatever you apply it to.
A million percent.
Your
A
words
million,
are so right.
a zillion percent. I can't even think what's bigger than a zillion. But it is just, these are the
Right.
things I wish somebody would have told me when I was transitioning. Like, hey, you know what? And we don't got to go someplace sexy like Waikiki. Wherever you go home, look at what's going on at home, and there's a need for skills. And
Hmm.
everyone's, oh, you're a laborer. Well, you know what? We thrive on labor, and if you can do it, you're going to do well. And listen, you can do a Google search of every veteran-owned business, and from junk removal to carpet cleaning to whatever. And yeah, it's not sexy, but shit, man, you're going to be writing your own ticket in no time. And so say yes. Don't be afraid.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's great advice. Um, and so something else we like to ask too, because there's so many different veteran benefits out there, and just to kind of see if maybe you utilize something that someone else didn't, that they don't know about. Was there any important veteran benefits that you utilize in your path to kind of where you're at now, Matt?
Yeah, man. Well, we could talk for another couple hours. And I see this in the good. And let me just start off by saying this one. I heard that my brother-in-law is an oncologist, and he's a veteran. And we talk about Army medicine and then veteran benefits. And Ed says, he's like, Matt, the old saying is, if you've been to one VA, you've been to one VA. And start there. And it's really true. People bag on the Veterans Administration all day long, and some with great merit, and some just being, I'm just riding the train, and I like to beat up on the VA. I personally have had more often than not a very good experience with the VA. And the biggest thing for me, truly for our family, has been the VA home loan world.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Using that VA. I didn't know shit. And remember, and not to put you guys on the spot on your ages, 2008, the housing market just crumbled. We were in the land of plenty, and then overnight, subprime credit default swaps just killed everything. And no one ever told me about buying a house and putting 20% down. That was talking Arabic to me. And I had to learn, this VA, home loan, basically getting rid of your PMI. That's a big deal. You don't have to put 20% down on your house, because who's got 20%? Who's got an extra? In simple math, you got $100,000 house, which is unheard of. But let's just say
Yeah.
100,000. Who's got 20 grand sitting around doing nothing? Like nobody. I certainly didn't. So the VA home loan process was a godsend for a guy getting out that was like, hey, I'd never bought a house before.
Yeah.
This is really helpful. And believe it or not, there are not only through the VA, but there are mortgage lenders and brokers and realtors. If you do a little bit of digging online, you can find that are committed to helping veterans do just that, to buy their home. And again, bell curve, shysters on the left, weirdos that are just crazy on the far right. But in the center of the bell, there are plenty of people that can help. Believe it or not, the average, lower enlisted, if we're going to use that, from a financial, from your doggone balance and loss sheet, that are going to help you get a house. And it's amazing. I don't want to say it's free money, but it's amazing. So for me, the VA home loan is probably underutilized. It's important to understand, and there are amazing services out there that can help you, the veteran, live that American dream and buy that house. They're going to go out of their way to do it. And I wish, again, somebody would tell me the close second. I would just say to everybody listening, if you're not utilizing your VA education benefits, you're a jackass. I'm sorry, I love you, but you're a jackass. You're not, and you're looking at the king of jackassery, who fumbled an awful lot for a lot of reasons that are for a discussion another day. Dig in. They want to help you. There is so much money in the VA to help veterans, whether it's go to the trades, or to go to school for post-secondary stuff, to go to, fill on to post-secondary. It's out there, but I'll shut up after this. The home loan is huge. Think about it, learn about it, do your homework, but it is there for you. And the savvy people have figured out how to buy investment property. And oh, by the way, this is now using, a benefit. It's not a hand me. It's a benefit to you to buy a property that will generate income forever. VRBOs, ever heard of it? I mean, it's out there. You can do this thing. So anyway, I hope those are two that one I would.
Those are good.
One.
Yeah,
Those are excellent.
You can use it more than once too.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Absolutely. No,
Right.
and you can't learn this in 3 weeks of transition. I mean, you can't.
Right. No, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. That's why we're here.
Yep. And in fairness, and I'll say this, because for what I'm about to say, there's a million people that are going to come back and say, oh, the VA sucks and blah, blah, blah. And I get it. I do. Again, been to one, you've been to one. However, this process, though, throughout the United States, it's solid, and there are a lot of people there to help you do it. And if you can muscle through the bureaucracy, because it is a bureaucracy, but it's out there. And if you give up, you're foolish. You're robbing yourself and your family out of a potentially great future.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I could probably go for another 2 hours, but I have to work in the morning. And maybe it's just an excuse to have you on again in the future.
Yeah, no, you guys are awesome. Truly, you're easy to talk to, and I do. And I'm not trying to be a weasel about it and patronizing, but it's important stuff. And everybody, as you all know, with all of your guests, everyone's got a different story, everyone's got a different lens. And for anyone listening, take what works, and all the rest of the stuff, flush it. And if it doesn't work, you say, man, Eversmann's leaking oil, and I blah blah blah. That's fine, but at least then maybe you'll know what not to do. But
Yeah.
but take it all in the spirits intended. What's worked for one guy. That's my 2 cents.
Well,
Yeah.
Matt, holy shit. It's been an honor, privilege, and really great conversation with you.
It really has. Yeah, thanks for staying up late with us. I know it's past midnight back where you
Yeah,
are.
exactly.
Well, you know what? Again, and this comes back to the same Army stuff. If this is the worst thing that happens today, we're in pretty good shape. You know what? We're not driving down Route Irish or Route Jackson or whatever they called them in, the nefarious names in Afghanistan. No one's shooting at us, hopefully.
Right.
And you know what? We're blessed to be here. And listen, I would be remiss if I didn't say this in closing, guys. Is listen, whatever mistakes who's listening, it's like, oh fuck, man, I didn't do this or that. I'm telling you, it's okay. Nothing that has happened in your life in transition, and my wife says this all the time, so bear with me, but nothing is unfigure-outable. Nothing is unfigure out. There is nothing that has doomed you. There is nothing that mistake you've made that a million other people truly haven't, yours truly included, haven't made before. So I promise you, don't give up. There's a solution. There is. And you know what? It will work. I promise you it will. Do not give up on any of this, whatever it is, quote unquote. Don't. It's out there. There are people to help, and you know what? Fuck, if it didn't work, we'll figure out the next solution. But I promise you, there is a yes out there. So that's my song and dance for the night, man.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Matt.
It was really nice to meet you, Matt.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your knowledge, as we discussed. All the knowledge that you gained, and there's another way we can download it to some other people. We thank you for listening, and we hope you got something helpful out of this.
Right now, the best way to support us is to simply spread the word. If you know a fellow veteran who could use some resources to elevate their life, send them our way.
Until next time, remember to check your 0s, 5s, 10s, and 25s.